Chapter 1932. After Chu Luiyue regained her identity, she had been carrying that notebook with her. Now it was lying in her interspatial ring. She didn't need to compare it to know that it was the same language. This made Chu Luiyue feel very complicated. Back then, she had lost her memory and couldn't understand the contents of the notebook. However, when she recalled the divine realm at Lingxiao College and regained her memory, she realized that she still couldn't understand it. At that time, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. But later, various things came one after another, and she gradually put this matter aside. Until now, when she saw the secret text on it, the puzzlement and doubts that had been buried in her heart surged again. This armillary shield was obviously a very ancient divine artifact. And the secret text on it must have been engraved on it a long time ago. Then, why did she use the same words in her notebook? When she first came to the Divine Ruins world, she clearly didn't come into contact with such content. But it was indeed her handwriting on it. Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples with a headache. Previously, she had asked Rong Xiu, and Rong Xiu also said that he didn't recognize the inscription on it. What was going on? Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but touch the space between her eyebrows. When the God-destroying tribulation descended, the armillary shield was completely awakened. At that time, she clearly felt a burning sensation between her eyebrows. This wasn't the first time such a situation had happened. It had happened when she was in danger several times before. It was just that it wasn't as intense as this time. At that moment, she almost thought that a flame was burning between her eyebrows. In fact, the force in her body seemed to be affected, as if it was about to boil. But this feeling lasted for a very short time. And every time such a situation happened, the situation was usually very urgent. So she had never had the time to study this problem. She didn't know if there were any secrets hidden in it. Just as Chu Luiyue was deep in thought, a series of familiar footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. She came back to her senses, put away the shield, and looked at the door. A tall figure walked in. It was Rong Xiu. Seeing Chu Luiyue standing alone in the room, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Waiting for me?" Chu Luiyue snorted. "Of course not." Rong Xiu did not mind. If she was not waiting for him, could it be that she was waiting for someone else? He walked over and wrapped his long arms around Chu Luiyue's slender waist. He pulled her into his embrace and bent down to kiss her. Chu Luiyue tilted her head and dodged. She raised her head and looked at him with bright eyes. "Have you arranged everything in the Peach Blossom Dock City?" Rong Xiu pinched her nose. "Of course. Are you still worried about what your husband is doing?" Chu Luiyue certainly wouldn't doubt Rong Xiu's ability. Last night, he said that the people from Yuntian Tower would arrive today. In the end they did. And there seemed to be quite a number of them. However, Chu Luiyue stayed in the Yu residence and did not go out to take a look. Everything was arranged by Rong Xiu. She shook her head and thought for a while. "I'm just thinking. Peach Blossom Dock finally had a few days of peace. I think it's going to be chaotic again." During this period, the 13 Yu residents and those who had chosen to follow the Yu residents had been working overtime. However, the damage to Peach Blossom Dock was too severe. They could only recover part of it in a short period of time. It would take a lot of time and energy to rebuild Peach Blossom Dock. Unfortunately, those people did not intend to give them the chance. This trouble will come sooner or later. It's better to do it sooner. Rong Xiu's thin lips curved slightly. A cold smile flashed across his eyes. Chu Luiyue nodded. "I know." She had taken over Peach Blossom Dock and many people would be jealous. Instead of waiting for them to secretly make a move, it was better to cut the Gordian knot now. Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. The next day came quickly. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged. As usual, she circulated the force in her body for a major cycle. Then she slowly opened her eyes. There seemed to be light flickering in her bright eyes. After obtaining a divine body, "I'm indeed different from before." Chu Luiyue clenched her fists and sighed emotionally. She had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Her cultivation speed was already faster than most cultivators. After cultivating a divine body, her cultivation had improved greatly. Moreover, after absorbing the energy of heaven and earth and converting it into her own force, it was purer than before. No wonder everyone wanted to cultivate a divine body. At that thought, Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed slightly. It had been a long time since she had seen Debao and the rest. Debao had helped her in the dark during the calamity at Lingxiao College. However, he had left without seeing her. Now that she thought about it, it had been a long time. There was also Diwu Xiangxia and Lan Xiao, the two seniors. She would have to make time to return to the Red Moon Desert after everything here was over. She remembered that the two of them did not have a divine body yet. She wondered if she would be able to help them refine their divine bodies like she had helped Debeo. Now that her strength had improved a lot, it shouldn't be difficult for her to help them. Suddenly she felt a faint wave of energy. Chu Luiyue suddenly looked up and looked outside the window. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Master, your highness, someone is here. It was Tsinyi's voice. The so-called someone is here? Needless to say, Chu Luiyue could guess who it was. She stood up and walked over to open the door. Chapter 1933. Tsinyi's expression instantly became subtle. His long and indifferent eyes narrowed slightly, and he seemed to smile. There's only a quarter of an hour difference. Chu Luiyue instantly understood what he meant. She frowned and then sneered. So Family E also wants to get involved in this mess. Rongxiu also walked over. These two families aren't close. In the past few years they haven't interacted much with each other. Chu Luiyue was more and more certain of her guess. It seemed that these two families had indeed joined forces. However, Family E didn't have any obvious conflicts of interest with them. They did this because the Nan family instigated them. It seems that Nan Yifan isn't completely unscrupulous. At least he managed to get Family E to come to help. In order to rope in this ally, he probably made a lot of sacrifices. Chu Luiyue felt that it was a little ridiculous. It was obvious that the Nan family was in the wrong and had offended them first. Now they actually had the nerve to come again. They even pulled in an ally. 24 people from the Nan family came. Including Nan Yifan, there are a total of 8 gods. There were 18 people from the Yi clan, but there were 10 from Her Eminence, more than half of them. Tsinyi's voice was as calm as ever. Right now they're all gathered outside the barrier, confronting our people and asking you and His Highness to come out. Chu Luiyue nodded. We'll go now. They were waiting for them. She wanted to see who dared to bully her. These two families had a total of 18 gods. It should be known that an ordinary first-rate aristocratic family would only have 5 or 6 god-revered experts. And they had sent so many of them to attack Peach Blossom Cove this time. It was obvious that their family's foundation was indeed very strong. However, this time it was still unknown who would have the last laugh. Outside Peach Blossom Cove's barrier, the Nan family and Family E stood on both sides. There was a distance between them. The relationship between the two families was indeed delicate, especially at this time when they were all at Peach Blossom Cove. Other than Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao, the others were completely unaware of the alliance. Therefore, when the two sides met, most people still maintained a high level of vigilance towards each other. Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao greeted each other politely and explained that their targets were Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu. Then they began to wait. The atmosphere was tense. At the city gate, the group of guards in charge of guarding the city were all on high alert as they stared at the people from the Nan family and Family E. Someone in the Family E crowd couldn't help but whisper, "When I heard those rumors before, I didn't quite believe them." However, judging from the current situation, Peach Blossom Dock has most likely fallen into the hands of Xuanhuan and his men. In the past, Peach Blossom Dock had always been a place where people could enter and exit freely. Yes. Also, have you all noticed that the barrier seems a little different? Also, the guards in charge of guarding it seem to be very loyal and devoted. When has the Peach Blossom Dock ever seen such a scene? I reckon that the rumor is somewhat credible. I just don't know how they did it. Everyone was discussing in low voices. They didn't quite believe it before, but now that they saw it with their own eyes, they couldn't help but doubt it. These guards looked different from those who had undergone formal training. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that they were a loose army. However, the aura of these people didn't seem weak at all. More importantly, their expressions were surprisingly similar. Their eyes said, "If you dare to come in, we will dare to beat you to death." They are really guarding Peach Blossom Dock. Yi Wentao and Nan Yifan were watching from the side. They exchanged a glance without batting an eyelid. They could also see the vigilance in each other's eyes. Before they came, they all thought that Rongxiu would directly send his men to attack. These were obviously not his soldiers. However, these people were surprisingly united. It was as if guarding Peach Blossom Dock was their greatest responsibility. Moreover, from their words, it was obvious that they respected Chu Luiyue very much. In the entire world of God, who didn't know that Peach Blossom Dock had all kinds of people? To be able to command all these people, the means behind this was really shocking and unsettling. Yi Wentao put his hands behind his back and faintly felt that things were different from what he had expected. If there were more people like this in Peach Blossom Dock City, then it wouldn't be so easy to take down Peach Blossom Dock. Nan Yifan didn't think too much. This time he came with the intention of cutting off all means of retreat. Therefore, even if Peach Blossom Dock was difficult to deal with, he would never turn back. There was no turning back for him. He looked up at the sky and twitched the corner of his mouth without a smile. We have been here for a long time. Why are you taking so long to report the news? Or are there people who are afraid and don't dare to come out? The Holy Son and Princess of Yuntian Tower are so cowardly? A guard stepped forward and said coldly, "Watch your words." These two were not people they could offend. At the same time, the people behind him drew their swords and sabers. Nan Yifan couldn't help but frown. These people looked like people from all walks of life. Why did they seem to be so protective of Chu Liyue and Rongxiu? However, this thought just flashed through his mind. He reprimanded coldly. "I was just telling the truth. Can't I do that? Rongxiu and Xuanhuan, you killed my son and the elders of the Nan family. Today my Nan clan will definitely settle this debt." All the guards looked at each other with a solemn expression. Nan Yuxing and the others had indeed died in their hands. It was reasonable that the Nan family would come to make them pay. After a while, one of the guards sneered. "Didn't they ask for it? If they didn't force and chase after them, Master, you wouldn't have done anything to them. They only have themselves to blame." Nan Yifan, Yi Wentao and the others were stunned. "Master you? Did he mean Chu Liyue? Did he mean that they respected and admired Chu Liyue more than Rongxiu?" At this moment, a clear and pleasant voice was heard. "Honorable guests, please forgive me for not coming out to greet you." Everyone looked over at the same time. Two people were walking out of the city hand in hand. The person who spoke was Chu Liyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1934. Seeing the smile on Chu Liyue's face, Nan Yifan was instantly enraged. His only son had died in the Peach Blossom Dock at the hands of these people. How could she still smile? What was the meaning of this? Contempt? Provocation? However, just at that moment, a gaze filled with coldness landed on his body, causing him to tremble with fear. Nan Yifan subconsciously looked at Rongxiu, who was standing aside, and couldn't help but shudder. A trace of fear grew from the bottom of his heart. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and forcibly dispelled these chaotic emotions. At this point, he had no choice but to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Rongxiu. Rongxiu's eyes swept over Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao, and his thin lips curved slightly. "Family Yi, family head Nan, long time no see. How have you been?" Nan Yifan's heart was filled with hatred. So many members of the Nan family had died in their hands. Shouldn't they know best whether they were fine? How could they have the nerve to ask such a question? Yi Wentao put his hands behind his back and nodded slightly. His expression was gentle and polite. "Greetings to the Holy Son." As he spoke, his eyes fell on Chu Liyue, sizing her up and scrutinizing her. He had heard of this woman's name countless times. But this was the first time he had seen her with his own eyes. She looked no more than 17 or 18 years old, with a slim figure and a beautiful face. In particular, her starry eyes had a calmness that didn't match her age. It was as if these things in front of her didn't affect her at all. Even if she knew what all this meant. Yi Wentao had a new level of respect for Chu Liyue. A woman who could attract Rongxiu's attention and insist on marrying was indeed extraordinary. In fact, Yi Wentao wasn't the only one. Family Yi and the people of the Nan family were now focused on Chu Liyue. They were actually filled with curiosity towards this woman who had risen to fame in the Divine Ruins world in such a short period of time. Of course, while they were looking at Chu Liyue was also looking at them. The Nan clan had 8 honorable gods and 16 high gods. Family Yi, 10 venerable gods, 8 high gods. Moreover, the strength of those high gods was not to be underestimated. It seemed that the two families had really put in a lot of effort to deal with her. The smile on Chu Liyue's face grew even brighter. Nan Yifan couldn't bear to see Chu Liyue laugh. It was very dazzling. Amidst the strange silence, he was the first to sneer. "What? You're finally willing to come out? I thought you were planning to hide in Peach Blossom Dock for the rest of your life." His voice was cold and his eyes were filled with undisguised hatred. Chu Liyue didn't seem to care as she smiled. She said with a smile, "Patriarch Nan, why do you say that? Peach Blossom Dock is my territory. My husband and I have just been married. Isn't it normal for us to come and stay for a while to relax? Besides, we didn't do anything wrong. Why do you say that we're hiding?" Nan Yifan's face turned red with anger, and the veins on his forehead bulged. This Chu Liyue was always sharp-tongued. "My son, Nan Yuxing, died in Peach Blossom Dock a few days ago. As the culprits, don't you feel guilty at all?" Nan Yifan suddenly raised his hand, pointed at Chu Luiyue and questioned sternly. Rong Xiu's face turned cold and he immediately took a step forward. A powerful aura suddenly descended upon them. At the same time, a fiery golden glow flashed across his eyes. Nan Yifan, if you don't want your hand anymore, just say it. His tone was low and his voice was cold as if it was mixed with ice shards. Nan Yifan's heart trembled and his fingers curled. However, he soon realized that he was too cowardly. For a moment, Nan Yifan was angry and annoyed. He had already planned to fight to the death, but when Rong Xiu spoke, he still subconsciously felt awe and fear. Nan Yifan was very embarrassed. Chu Luiyue glanced at him from the corner of his eye and raised his eyebrows. Nan Yifan's reaction was a little ridiculous. If he had more confidence, he wouldn't be like this. She took Rong Xiu's hand and shook her head gently, indicating that he didn't need to be angry with this kind of person. It wasn't worth it. She looked at Nan Yifan and said frankly, Master Nan, it seems that there is some misunderstanding in this. Your son, Nan Yuxing, didn't die in our hands. The one who really killed him was none other than the elder of your Nan family, Luo Yan. Nan Yifan was so angry that he laughed. Xuanhuan, do you know what kind of nonsense you're talking about? Luo Yan came with them this time to protect Nan Yuxing. How could he kill him? Even if you want to frame me, please don't find such a ridiculous reason. Chu Luiyue knew that he wouldn't believe her, so she raised her eyebrows and curled her lips without a smile. Countless people in Peach Blossom Dock saw this with their own eyes and can testify. If you don't believe me, you can ask someone. You also said that this is very ridiculous. Don't I know that? If it's not true, why would I say that? Chu Luiyue's words made Nan Yifan waver for a moment. But this thought just flashed through his mind. He said angrily, Peach Blossom Dock is now under your control. Those people only listen to you. How can there be truth in their mouths? Chu Luiyue followed his advice smoothly. You don't believe what we say or what outsiders say. Then, you should at least believe the words of your own elders, right? Nan Yifan's expression froze for a moment. What? It's literally what I said. When Luo Yan ended Nan Yuxing's life with his own hands, Nan Hongyang and the other elders were all watching. Chu Luiyue curled her lips and said word by word, If you don't believe me, why don't you ask the elders to come over and confront me? Nan Yifan's breath stopped. Chu Luiyue is serious. She really dares to confront me. Could it be that what she said was true? The person who killed Nan Yuxing was actually Luo Yan? But, what is going on? Nan Yifan's mind was a mess. No, it's impossible. When he sent people over this time, he specially selected the elders he trusted the most to ensure his safety. Luo Yan couldn't have killed Nan Yuxing, and the remaining elders couldn't have betrayed him. Nan Yifan clenched his fists and tried to convince himself. However, Chu Luiyue's words were like a thorn that pierced his heart. It made him extremely uncomfortable. Behind him, the people of the Nan family were also shocked and looked at each other. Their first reaction was, of course, disbelief. But Chu Luiyue said with certainty and even said that they could confront him. Who knows if you guys use some despicable means to force them to lie? After struggling for a while, Nan Yifan finally thought of a rebuttal and shouted. They have already fallen into your hands. Aren't they at your mercy? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1935. Chu Luiyue laughed when he heard that. I didn't expect Master Nan to look down on your family's god experts so much. Nan Yifan's face turned green and pale at the sarcastic remark. You. I don't think I need to remind Master Nan. Among the people who came before, there were 5 god experts among the remaining 8 elders except for Nan Yuxing. Chu Luiyue shrugged. Even though there are only 4 of them left, they're still reputable god realm experts. Master Nan said that they are at my mercy. I don't know if you think too highly of me or look down on your family. Nan Yifan's chest heaved violently. He was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Xuanhuan, don't go too far. I'm just telling the truth. How is that going too far? Chu Luiyue blinked his eyes, looking puzzled. Didn't you say those words yourself, Patriarch Nan? Everyone in the Nan family, you should have heard it too, right? Everyone in the Nan family fell into silence. They were extremely embarrassed. They couldn't understand. They were the ones who came to suppress Chu Luiyue and the others. Why were they the ones being questioned in the end? Nan Yifan took a deep breath and finally regained his senses. No matter what, my son Nan Yuxing and the 4 elders of the Nan clan have all died here. Do you dare to say that these things have nothing to do with you? Today you must give the Nan family an explanation. Otherwise don't blame us for being rude. Chu Luiyue asked curiously. When has Master Nan ever been polite to me? In the past he was quite respectful and polite to Rongxiu, but now he was no longer like that. Why did it sound like he was very nice to them in the past? Nan Yifan almost couldn't breathe. He finally realized that Chu Luiyue was indeed born with a sharp tongue. It wasn't enough to describe her as eloquent. He couldn't win against her in an argument. He would only make himself angry. By the way, since Patriarch Nan mentioned it, I'll just say it directly. In fact, even if you didn't come this time, we still plan to find an opportunity to pay you a visit. Chu Luiyue raised his chin. Because we also happen to be looking for the Nan family to ask for an explanation. Nan Yifan almost thought that he had misheard. He had never seen such an arrogant person. They were the ones who had come to the Peach Blossom Cove to demand an explanation. Not only had she refused to give them an explanation, she had even turned the tables on them. What did you say? Nan Yifan asked almost subconsciously. Chu Luiyue curled his lips, but there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. I say, Master Nan, you took advantage of the fact that we left the Yuntian Tower and only brought a few people to the Peach Blossom Dock to send people to kill us. After you failed, you encouraged the people of the Nan family to denounce us. How should we settle this debt? She deliberately slowed down her speech. Every word and sentence was crystal clear. Everyone's expression changed. Chu Luiyue's words contained too much information. Nan Yifan's heart seemed to have been hammered by something. He immediately shouted out in a conditioned reflex. You're talking nonsense. Whether I'm talking nonsense or Patriarch Nan has ulterior motives? Everyone is here today. Won't we find out after an investigation? Chu Luiyue rubbed her temples gently. There was a smile on her lips, but there was a hint of sarcasm and impatience on her face. She had to admit that Nan Yifan's series of actions really disgusted her. Not to mention what happened before, just the fact that he chose to kill Nan Yi in order to save Nan Yuxing was not something a normal person could do. Later, he tacitly allowed Nan Yuxing to bring Luo Yan and the others to kill her and Rongxiu to wash away the guilt in his heart. After failing, he pushed all the blame to others. Chu Luiyue was amazed. He actually had the cheek to bring so many people from the Nan family to the Peach Blossom Dock and say that he wanted to seek an explanation for the deaths of the Nan family elders for his son? She clapped her hands. Sun Yi, bring Luo Yan and the others here. Yes. Sun Yi bowed and turned to leave. Yi Wentao furrowed his brows and became vigilant. Sun Yi had been following behind Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue previously. However, until he spoke, he was just standing there without any sense of presence, as if he was invisible. Even he didn't notice this man's existence just now. Was he Chu Luiyue's subordinate? Sensing this gaze, Chu Luiyue's eyes turned slightly. Yi Wentao had just retracted his gaze. Chu Luiyue sized him up with interest. A person like Nan Yifan was nothing to worry about. In comparison, it seemed that family Yi was more difficult to deal with. Yi Wentao looked gentle and harmless on the surface and was very elegant. However, how could someone who could reach his current position be a simple person? Not to mention, he had chosen to join forces with the Nan family. Chu Luiyue's gaze then landed on the two people behind Yi Wentao and smiled playfully. There were two acquaintances on the family Yi's side. Yi Wentao and Jun Jiuqing. She had long known that Yi Wentao came from a good family, but she never knew that he was from the family Yi. And Jun Jiuqing. From the looks of it, he could be considered a member of the family Yi now. Vice President, I haven't had the chance to properly greet you since we met last time. I didn't expect to see you here. Chu Luiyue said with a hint of mockery and sarcasm in her words. They didn't come with good intentions. Yi Wentao didn't care about his face at all and directly stood on the opposite side of them. Digression, 6 o'clock. It will take some time to write about the bridal chamber. Ahem, mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1936. Yi Wenzhuo was unmoved. When he decided to come with the family Yi, he had already thought about what he would face later. Chu Luiyue was Nan Suhuai's beloved disciple. If he made things difficult for her, he would undoubtedly offend Nan Suhuai. It was even possible that he would lose his position as the vice dean because of this. But so what? He felt aggrieved as the vice dean of Lingxiao College. Even if he lost it, there was nothing to feel sorry about. When Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue got married, Nan Suhuai's actions were almost equivalent to confirming that the next dean of the college would be Chu Luiyue. What else did he have to worry about? Therefore, in the end, he still chose to come as a member of the family Yi. Indeed, I haven't seen you for a while. I didn't expect you to be so promising. Yi Wenzhuo said sarcastically. From the looks of it, Peach Blossom Dock was really under the control of Chu Luiyue, and Rongxiu didn't interfere much. However, these things were complicated. No one could tell what was going on until the last moment. Chu Luiyue nodded happily. Thank you for the compliment, Vice Dean. It seemed that she didn't hear the sarcasm in his words. Iwenzhua choked, then snorted and waved his sleeves fiercely. He wanted to see how long Chu Luiyue could laugh. Jun Jiuqing, who was standing at the side, didn't show any expression from beginning to end. When he saw the two of them holding hands, a dim light flashed in his eyes. There seemed to be some kind of inexplicable tacit understanding between them. When they looked at each other, they could easily understand each other's thoughts. It was as if there was a layer of invisible boundary that surrounded the two of them. No one was allowed to enter. Now that a strong enemy was here and danger was in front of her, she still looked calm and composed. Her beautiful eyes and brows were relaxed. Every frown and smile seemed to have a unique charm. However, compared to before, she was more gentle and charming. Of course, it was only when she was looking at the person beside her that she would reveal her little girl demeanor. She was like a dusty pearl that had finally blossomed. Jun Jiuqing looked away and clenched his hands in his sleeves. He lowered his eyes slightly to hide the ripples in his eyes. Patriarchy, may I know why you have brought people here today? Rong Xiu's gaze lingered on Jun Jiuqing for a moment before he looked at Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao smiled. Don't misunderstand, holy son. We're here today to do business with you. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. I don't know what business I can do with family Yi. Yi Wentao's expression remained the same as he smiled faintly. To be honest, we have our eyes on this Peach Blossom Cove. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched. As long as the saint is willing to give up the Peach Blossom Dock, you can name any conditions you want. His attitude was courteous and his expression was warm and gentle. However, his words almost made Chu Luiyue laugh out of anger. So this family Yi was here for the Peach Blossom Cove? He sounded generous, but why didn't he ask if she was willing? Previously, she had chatted with Rong Xiu and said that after this, those who coveted the Peach Blossom Cove would take action. However, she did not expect that family Yi would be the first to make a move. Rong Xiu smiled faintly when he heard this. The Peach Blossom Cove belongs to you, if you want it, you should go to her. Yi Wentao was stunned for a moment. He had always thought that most of the rumors were false. Chu Luiyue should not have the ability to take over the Peach Blossom Cove. Rong Xiu must have taken action in the end. Therefore, he directly told Rong Xiu what he said just now. However, he did not expect Rong Xiu to be so straightforward. The Peach Blossom Cove belonged to Chu Luiyue. The decision on how to deal with the Peach Blossom Cove was in Chu Luiyue's hands. Yi Wentao's heart was beating like a drum. He had some understanding of Rong Xiu. If he was really the one who took over the Peach Blossom Cove, he would have rejected his suggestion directly. However, he actually changed the topic to Chu Luiyue. Was he trying to praise Chu Luiyue in front of everyone? Or was the Peach Blossom Cove really taken over by Chu Luiyue? Yi Wentao was not sure. In comparison, he was more afraid of Rong Xiu. As for Chu Luiyue, he did not think much of him. However, if the rumors were true and the Peach Blossom Cove was taken over by Chu Luiyue alone, then he would have to re-evaluate his judgment of her. However, Yi Wentao was not an ordinary person. After being rejected by Rong Xiu, he went along with the flow and looked at Chu Luiyue with a smile. Sorry. What do you think, Your Highness? Impossible. Before Yi Wentao could finish his sentence, Chu Luiyue cut him off. What kind of joke was this? She had spent so much time and effort to take over the Peach Blossom Cove. It was not easy to turn the Peach Blossom Cove into her territory. How could she give it up so easily? Yi Wentao paused for a moment. In fact, he had expected Chu Luiyue's reaction and attitude. If it were anyone else, they would have rejected him as well. However, he was not in a hurry. Why are you in such a hurry to reject us, Your Highness? Perhaps our conditions can persuade you? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and smiled. Oh, then I'd like to hear what family Yi has in mind. The Peach Blossom Cove was vast and had abundant energy of heaven and earth. More importantly, it was directly connected to the Gate Realm and could freely enter and exit the realm of divine ruins. Such a treasured land was a priceless treasure. What else in the world could be compared to it? On the other side, the Nan family members had different reactions when they heard this. That was right. How could they forget that the Peach Blossom Cove was also a priceless treasure? They were only thinking about revenge and forgot about this important point. If they could take the Peach Blossom Cove, then some people were tempted. Some people started to look at Nan Yifan to see what he was thinking. However, at this moment, Nan Yifan's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. Other than anger and resentment, nothing else could be seen. He did not seem to be interested in the Peach Blossom Cove. All his energy and attention was still focused on revenge. That was true. He was the one who lost his son and had no descendants. Naturally, he was the one who was upset. Although the others were angry, they could not compare to Nan Yifan. Some people were tempted, but they suppressed their thoughts unwillingly. Even if they could defeat Rongxiu and Chu Luiyue, how could they compete with Family Yi? Originally, the two families were on par. However, after the previous setback, the Nan family probably could not compete with Family Yi. Just the goddess alone, they had invited 10 of them this time. They were determined to get the Peach Blossom Cove. Hearing Chu Luiyue's question, Yi Wentao seemed to smile. The lives of the Holy Sun, the princess, and the countless cultivators in the Peach Blossom Cove city, is this enough to exchange for the Peach Blossom Cove? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1937. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the room suddenly froze. A gust of coldness gushed out and the temperature dropped to freezing point. The air seemed to have frozen and the surroundings were so silent that it was almost suffocating. What he meant was that if Chu Luiyue refused to give up the Peach Blossom Dock, the Family Yi would kill everyone in the Peach Blossom Dock. The smile on Chu Luiyue's face gradually disappeared. Her eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of frost and it was bone-chillingly cold. Family Yi, are you threatening me? Yi Wentao shook his head. No, I'm very sincere in talking about this business with Princess Yu. His tone was so sincere and so was his expression. Those who did not know him would really think that he was full of sincerity. Chu Luiyue sized him up and laughed instead of being angry. It seems that Family Yi has a lot of confidence in yourself. Yi Wentao nodded slightly and said tactfully and straightforwardly, I never do things that I am not sure of. The people he brought with him were the most powerful people in the Family Yi. Together with the Nan family, it would be a piece of cake for them to deal with the Peach Blossom Dock. He knew that Rongxiu was powerful and he must have been prepared beforehand. But this time, since he had decided to make a move, he would not allow himself to fail. Otherwise, none of them would have a good ending. He looked steadily at Chu Luiyue. What do you think of my offer, princess? Chu Luiyue's lips curved slightly and her eyes seemed to twinkle. Her red lips parted slightly and spat out a few words to express her most sincere intentions. I am looking at you farting. Dead silence. No one expected Chu Luiyue to throw out such a sentence. She was simply tearing off the other party's face and throwing it to the ground to trample on it. She did not give the other party any face at all. The Nan family was shocked. Chu Luiyue is so unreasonable? The Family Yi was also shocked. What are you talking about? Even Yi Wentao, who would remain calm even if MT Tai collapsed in front of him, after hearing this sentence, his handsome and elegant face twisted for a moment. He came from an extremely good background and his path had been smooth sailing. When had he ever been humiliated like this to his face? It was extremely unpleasant to hear. It was extremely humiliating. On the other hand, the guards of the Peach Blossom Dock who were standing at the side all revealed looks of admiration. Master Yu is indeed Master Yu. How domineering. This was the way to deal with such a shameless and high and mighty person. Yi Wentao took a deep breath and finally regained his composure. He suppressed his anger and looked at Rongxiu. Saint, I'm here to discuss this business with sincerity. Isn't Princess Consort going overboard with her actions? Rongxiu's thin lips curled into a smile. I'm sorry, her has always been outspoken. There's nothing wrong with her except that she likes to speak the truth. Master Family Yi is magnanimous, so I'm sure you won't fuss over such a small matter. These words made Yi Wentao unable to say a single word. His face was a mix of red and white. How exciting. Chu Luiyue once again gave her man a thumbs up in her heart. Impressive. Truly impressive. What did it mean to win without shedding a drop of blood? This was what it meant. Every word was like a sharp knife, cutting Yi Wentao's pretentious manner into pieces. After losing face in front of so many people, it would be difficult for him to pick it up again. Yi Wentao held his breath and had just spat out 2 words when he was interrupted. Master, they're here. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice. Sun Yi had returned. Behind him were a few guards from the Yu residence, who were escorting Luo Yan and the other 3. Ever since Luo Yan gave his instructions, Chu Luiyue didn't make things difficult for them anymore. Instead, he let his subordinates take good care of them. This time they even changed into clean new clothes. From the outside, apart from their pale faces and dispirited spirits, they didn't seem to be any different from ordinary people. However, everyone present was quite strong and someone quickly saw the problem. Why are they so weak? And there doesn't seem to be any force fluctuations on their bodies. Someone in the Nan residence asked softly. Wait, it was easy to understand. It was most likely Chu Luiyue and the others who tortured them. However, it was really strange that they didn't have any force fluctuations on their bodies. Even if there was a barrier between them, they shouldn't be too far apart, so they should be able to sense it. Nan Yifan's heart sank and he immediately shouted. Xuanhuan Yu, what did you do to them? Chu Luiyue said unhurriedly. What's the hurry, Master Nan? I just gave them some medicine so that they can stay here quietly. However, aren't they still here? As she spoke, she walked to Luo Yan's side. Luo Yan, Master Nan said that we killed Nan Yuxing. Do you have anything to say about this? Everyone's eyes were focused on Luo Yan. He slowly raised his head. Nan Yifan and him looked at each other for a moment. That cold and gloomy gaze made Nan Yifan feel a strong sense of uneasiness. Luo Yan opened his mouth, his voice was hoarse. I killed Nan Yuxing. Nan Yifan clenched his fists. Luo Yan, are you being threatened by them? Don't worry, we're here today to seek justice for you. Just tell the truth. Luo Yan just looked at him, his eyes cold and strange. I did kill Nan Yuxing. Many people saw it at that time. Nan Yifan, shouldn't you be the clearest about why I killed him? Digression, 7 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1938. His voice was cold and mechanical. Only when one looked carefully and saw the hatred in his eyes would one understand that his words were indeed from the bottom of his heart. Nan Yifan was stunned. Everyone in the Nan family was also stunned. Luo Yan actually admitted that he was the one who killed Nan Yuxing? What else did he say? Nan Yifan knew best why he did it? Countless doubtful and suspicious gazes fell on Nan Yifan. And in Nan Yifan's heart, stormy waves were set off. Luo Yan's words, could it be that he already knew? Huge worry and fear surged in his heart. He opened his mouth, but it was as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat. Chu Luiyue admired the changes in Nan Yifan's expression for a while before he said, since everyone is here, it's better to lay things out on the table. Luo Yan, why don't you tell everyone in person why you came to Peach Blossom Dock this time? Nan Yifan's heart seemed to be clenched by something. Luo Yan, don't forget that you're from the Nan family. No matter how they coerce you, you can't betray the Nan family. He shouted sternly. Luo Yan seemed to have heard a joke as the corners of his mouth twitched. Nan Yifan, are you muddle-headed? My surname is Luo, not Nan. The corners of Nan Yifan's eyes twitched violently, and his entire body turned cold. Then he heard Luo Yan continue. Our purpose this time is very simple, to kill you. When we found out that you came to the Peach Blossom Dock without bringing anyone with you, we had this plan and came here directly. We originally wanted to get rid of you directly, but we didn't expect that we would be the ones who lost. Luo Yan's expression was indifferent, and his words were cold and clear. Everyone in the Nan family was already in an uproar. The version they heard was not like this. Who was telling the truth between Nan Yifan and Luo Yan? As for the reason why we want to kill you, it's naturally because of Yi. Not many people knew that Nan Yi had offended Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue in the Divine Ruins world. However, the Nan family and Family Yi were very well informed. As long as they were willing, it would not be difficult for them to find out. Moreover, on the day of Rong Xiu's wedding, Nan Yi had openly gone to the Yuntian Tower. Although he had been rejected, he had done it too openly. It was hard not to know. And Nan Yi's sudden death some time ago had caused a lot of speculation. In the beginning, just like Nan Yuxing and the others, I thought Yi had died in your hands. However, he later found out that this was not the case. At the mention of Nan Yi, Luo Yan's expression finally changed. Heartache, pity, regret, resentment. He took a deep breath. The one who really killed Yi was none other than Nan Yifan. Nan Yifan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He almost reflexively shouted, Luo Yan, do you know what you're saying? His emotions were abnormally agitated. His face was flushed red, but his lips were pale and trembling violently. Everyone from the Nan family was stunned for a moment. They didn't believe it either. Anyone could have killed Nan Yi but not Nan Yifan. He was Nan Yi's biological father. Luo Yan, are you confused? Second Miss is the apple of the family head's eye. He dotes on her too much. Why would he harm her? That's right. Even if you betrayed the Nan family and stood on their side, you should at least say that there's a possibility, right? Luo Yan, why do you have to do this? Everyone from the Nan family found Luo Yan's words absurd and laughable, and they all criticized him. However, Luo Yan only sneered and stared at Nan Yifan. That's right. I also wanted to guess that it was someone else. Unfortunately, your family head didn't give me the chance. Nan Yifan, why don't you say it yourself whether it's true or not? Tell me, how did you kill Yi and forcefully take her Yuan Meridian in order to help your good son recover his Yuan Meridian? Luo Yan's words were full of hatred and resentment. And with these words all the noise finally disappeared. The scene fell into dead silence again. The expressions of the people from the Nan family became subtle. Others didn't know but they knew. Some time ago, there was indeed a problem with Nan Yuxing's body. Nan Yifan only said that he was injured and needed some time to recuperate. But there were actually many people who were secretly suspicious. Because the courtyard was very strictly guarded, Nan Yifan only allowed his most trusted celestial physician and his subordinates to go there. No one else was allowed to enter. Later, Nan Yi died. Not long after that, Nan Yuxing's body recovered and he even broke through. At first they were only a little surprised but they didn't think much of it. However, Luo Yan's words instantly tore apart that layer of concealment and revealed the truth before their eyes. After understanding the meaning behind this, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths rose and fell one after another. Didn't this mean that Nan Yi really died in Nan Yifan's hands? The family head dotes on second miss so much. How could it be? Someone muttered in disbelief. Someone else had a meaningful look on his face. No matter how good second miss is, how can she be more important than eldest young master? He's the most suitable heir to the family head position in this bloodline. All kinds of chaotic voices sounded. Everyone looked at Nan Yifan with eyes full of doubt. Nan Yifan didn't look back, but he also felt uneasy. His limbs seemed to be numb and he almost couldn't feel anything. Only layers of bone-chilling coldness surged out from the deepest part of his body and swallowed him. You. He wanted to speak and deny Luo Yan's words. But he only realized that his voice was trembling when he said it. Luo Yan hated him. He wanted to drag him into hell completely. He wanted him to never be able to make a comeback. That's right. He had always doted on Nan Yi. Now that he knew this, he naturally wouldn't let it go. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Nan Yifan's mind, but it also seemed to be blank. A crisp applause sounded. Everyone came back to their senses and realized that the person who was clapping was Chu Liyue. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Master Nan, I really couldn't tell that you had such a temperament and means. You were clearly the one who harmed your own children, but now you have the cheek to bite back and even made so many people from the Nan family accompany you. I'm impressed, I'm really impressed. However, if Nan Yi and Nan Yuxing knew about this in the underworld, they would probably hate you for having a father like you, right? Nan Yifan's chest shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1939. He was so agitated that he vomited blood because of Chu Liyue's words. There was silence all around. The Nan family members were in disbelief. Even the family E members looked at Nan Yifan differently. Could it be that what Chu Liyue said was true? Did Nan Yifan really do those things? If that was the case then, Nan Yifan's reputation would be ruined from now on. Not only would he lose his position as the head of the family, but he would also become a rat on the street, hated by everyone. Who would dare to work with someone who could do such a thing to his own child? Who would still treat him well? Finally, someone from the Nan family stood up and asked, "Head of the family, do you have anything to say?" Everyone's burning eyes fell on Nan Yifan. They needed an explanation. Nan Yifan was filled with hatred. When he learned that Luo Yan and the others were trapped, he felt a little uneasy, but he was not really worried that they would choose to betray him. These people were his confidants who had followed him for many years, and they were the people he trusted the most. Moreover, during this period he was immersed in grief and resentment most of the time, and his mind had been in a tense state. His mind was full of revenge, and he had no extra energy and spirit to care about other things. Unexpectedly, Luo Yan chose to betray him right in front of him. In front of so many people he revealed everything. There seemed to be a ball of fire burning in Nan Yifan's chest, and it was so hot that his eyes were dyed with a trace of scarlet. He slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked back. His cold and fierce eyes swept across the Nan family members like a sharp blade, and stopped for a while on the person who spoke. That person's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously took half a step back. Nan Yifan's eyes were too scary. "You are all important people in the Nan family. Do you need me to teach you who to believe and who not to believe?" Nan Yifan clenched his fists, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. He suddenly raised his hand and pointed at Luo Yan and the others. These people have been trapped in Peach Blossom Dock for several days. Who knew what had happened during this period of time? You don't believe me, but you believe them? A series of rhetorical questions shook the hearts of the Nan family members. Although what Luo Yen said seemed to be true, Nan Yifan's words were not without reason. Who knew if someone had done something behind the scenes? Nan Yuxing was already dead. Nan Yi was also dead. As for what the truth was, there were many different opinions and it was impossible to investigate thoroughly. They were also hesitant about who they should believe. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Of course, Nan Yifan wouldn't admit it. Once these things were proven to be true, he would be completely destroyed. Therefore, no matter what method he used, he would choose to quibble and push the blame to others. Nan Yifan continued. If you still consider yourselves members of the Nan family, then today, follow me. Whoosh. Suddenly, a silver spear appeared in his hand. The spearhead was incomparably sharp, and the patterns on the body of the spear intertwined with each other. I'd like to see how long you can defend yourselves. Before he finished speaking, his feet moved and he charged straight for Chu Luiyue. Silver blue lightning swam under his feet, making crackling sounds. He was a god and his strength was already strong. Now that he used his movement technique, his speed was naturally even faster. In almost the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the barrier. Soul-devouring silver dragon spear. Nan Yifan's aura surged and a powerful pressure suddenly descended. Chi-chi-chi. A large number of barbs suddenly appeared on the silver spear. From afar it looked like a piece of scale armor. And the scale armor was suffused with a purple-red light, cold and strange. It was obviously dipped in poison. In the blink of an eye the spear had arrived. Everyone's hearts tightened. They didn't expect Nan Yifan to suddenly attack. Just as they were thinking about whether Chu Luiyue could withstand this attack, they were surprised to find that Chu Luiyue didn't move at all. She just stood there, her shoulders and back straight like a pine tree. A gentle breeze blew and her skirt fluttered. Her long hair fluttered gently and she raised her head slightly. She just stood there quietly, her expression calm and composed. It was as if she didn't care about Nan Yifan's attack at all. It wasn't just them, Nan Yifan also frowned because of her reaction. It was too strange. The distance between the two of them wasn't far, and he was already close to the barrier. Could it be that she was scared silly? Nan Yifan thought in his heart. But when he met Chu Luiyue's eyes, he realized that he was wrong. That pair of bright starry eyes was like a deep and calm pool, as if no matter what happened, it wouldn't cause the slightest ripple. Even the corners of her lips were slightly raised, as if she was smiling. Smiling? What was she smiling about? Nan Yifan couldn't understand. Chu Luiyue seemed to be hiding countless secrets that couldn't be understood no matter how hard he tried. Seeing him attack, she didn't seem surprised at all and even looked like she was waiting to see a joke? Yes, that was the feeling. Nan Yifan's heart instantly burned with anger. Chu Luiyue's appearance and attitude, wasn't she waiting to see him make a fool of himself? But what right did she have to do that? He knew that Chu Luiyue's strength was tyrannical, far surpassing that of ordinary high gods. But she was still a high god after all. He had broken through to high god several years ago. Could it be that he couldn't even take her down? Previously in the god-slaying mound he was afraid of Rong Xiao, but now he had nothing to be afraid of. So he didn't hesitate at all for this attack. But at this moment, a tyrannical and flexible force suddenly stopped Nan Yifan. Nan Yifan was stunned. Only then did he realize that what stopped him was none other than the Peach Blossom Cove's barrier. The barrier that used to be fragile and chaotic and could be entered and exited at will, now seemed to have become an iron wall. He couldn't advance even half an inch. Nan Yifan's fatal attack was fiercely stabbed out, but it was silently stopped by the barrier. The two forces began to quietly and fiercely fight each other. Because of the energy fluctuations, circles of ripples seemed to have appeared on the barrier. Under the sunlight, it flickered with fine and dazzling lights, bright and beautiful. Nan Yifan was stunned. His soul-devouring silver dragon spear was a supreme treasure. It was almost indestructible. Yet now it was easily stopped by a spirit formation? Everyone, if you want to take my life, you must first have the ability to break into the Peach Blossom Cove, right? Chu Luiyue spoke slowly with a smile on her face, but her eyes were cold and fierce. Her eyes slowly and firmly swept across the crowd. I know that in the world of divine ruins, there are many people who covet the Peach Blossom Cove. So today I'll be frank with you. The Peach Blossom Cove is here. Whoever wants to take it, feel free to come. Whoever can take half an inch of the Peach Blossom Cove's territory from my hands, I will admit that he is capable. Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1940. Her clear voice spread far and wide, landing clearly in everyone's ears. Many people were shocked. Chu Luiyue was openly declaring war. Moreover, she was challenging all the aristocratic families in the entire Divine Ruins world. Did she know what she was saying? After all, Peach Blossom Dock had just been taken over by her. Even if it had excellent conditions in all aspects, it was impossible to prepare everything in such a short time. There were many people in Peach Blossom Dock, but they were all mixed up and had their own camps. Even if Chu Luiyue had become the master of Peach Blossom Dock, how could she build up a powerful force that belonged to her in just a few days? Compared to the other aristocratic families that had been passed down for thousands of years, her force was simply too weak to withstand a single blow. She still dared to be so arrogant? They soon understood why Chu Luiyue had such courage. Because in the next moment she raised her hand. The girl's hand was slender and fair, soft and boneless. It did not look threatening at all. Then she waved her hand gently. Just a little. Whoosh, the enchantment of Peach Blossom Dock, which was faintly glowing, started to fluctuate violently in an instant. The sound of surging tides came from within. From this sound, it was not difficult to guess what kind of terrifying energy was contained in it. Nan Yifun's expression changed slightly. He had a bad feeling. His sixth sense, which had been honed by years of battle experience, told him that he needed to retreat immediately. But he hesitated for a moment. In front of so many people, wouldn't it be too embarrassing to take the initiative to retreat right after making a move? But it was this moment of hesitation. Boom. A terrifying surge of energy surged forth. A new round of even crazier strangulation began. Before Nan Yifun could react, he felt something tighten around his hand. He immediately looked over and realized that a translucent energy with a faint, gorgeous light had tightly bound his soul-devouring silver dragon spear. Nan Yifun knew that something was wrong and wanted to pull it back immediately. But he realized that he could not pull it back at all. Nan Yifun panicked. There was something wrong with this enchantment. However, just as he was filled with shock and suspicion, crack, the sound of something breaking could be heard. His heart shuddered as well. In the next moment he saw a sharp barbed scale on the body of the spear shatter. Obviously, it had been forcefully crushed by the power of the barrier. Nan Yifun's heart was instantly filled with shock. The power of this barrier far exceeded his expectations. He finally realized that something was wrong. Seeing that the translucent power was still spreading along the body of the spear, heading straight for his face, Nan Yifun immediately let go of his hand, moved his feet and quickly retreated. Crack. Almost as soon as he left, the sound of shattering rang out one after another. Inside and outside the barrier, countless pairs of eyes saw the shocking scene. Just like that, the soul-devouring silver dragon spear, which could be considered a top-notch divine artifact, was slowly being crushed by the Peach Blossom Cove's barrier. As the ripples on the barrier surged, the silver spear broke inch by inch and was finally annihilated into ashes. If Nan Yifun had been a step slower, he would have been in danger. Peach Blossom Dock's enchantment. How could it be so powerful? Someone in the crowd murmured in shock. They did not know that the Peach Blossom Dock had been rebuilt after its destruction. Now, the enchantment was covered with the power of the god-destroying tribulation, so it was naturally not comparable to an ordinary enchantment. Swish. Chu Luiyue raised his sword with one hand. He pointed to the front. Everyone please? Digression. Beginning of spring, I hope everything will get better as soon as possible. Mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1941. The sharp edge of the sword flickered with a cold light under the sunlight. A strong fighting spirit erupted from Chu Luiyue's body. Although there was still a barrier between them, Family E and the Nan family members who were standing outside couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Was this aura really something that a high god could possess? Nan Yifun took a few steps back and barely managed to stabilize his body. Although he dodged in time and wasn't injured, it was obvious that he had lost the confrontation just now. Moreover, it was in front of so many people. A high god powerhouse was actually easily stopped by a high god and even had his weapon taken away. It was simply a great humiliation. Nan Yifun stood there, feeling like he was in an extremely sorry state. He had never suffered such a loss in the hands of anyone whose cultivation was lower than his. He was shocked and angry, wishing that he could immediately rush over and kill Chu Luiyue. However, Nan Yifun was the head of the Nan family after all. He had been in a high position for many years. If he really didn't have a brain, he would have been pulled down long ago. How could he have come to this day? He took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Previously, he had been stimulated by the deaths of Nan Yi and Nan Yuxing, and his emotions had been very unstable. Coupled with his lack of understanding of Chu Liyue's strength, it led him to do so many stupid things under impulse. But now, Chu Liyue had directly crushed the soul-devouring silver dragon spear and blocked his attack with little effort, which finally woke him up. It was obviously impossible for this to go on. Chu Liyue's fighting strength was obviously far higher than he had expected. In other words, if he wanted to take down Peach Blossom Dock, he would have to pay a higher price. Nan Yifun's mind raced as he slowly exhaled. It didn't matter. The Nan family had sent 8 high gods this time, plus the 10 from family E. Their fighting strength would be extremely strong. Chu Liyue could stop him alone, but could he stop all of them? Since you have said so, then don't blame us for being impolite. After Nan Yifun finished speaking, he crossed his hands in front of him. Vigorous origin power gushed out of his body in an unending stream. A dazzling purple light quickly covered his entire body. Purple cloud armor. Soon, his entire body was covered by the purple scale armor. Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes slightly. This aura was strangely familiar. Then Nan Yifun moved his feet slightly, clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out fiercely. Purple cloud fist. Break. Last time he had used 70% of his strength. This time he didn't hesitate to use his full strength. The fist wrapped in the purple cloud armor pierced through the air. The void trembled and collapsed one after another. A black spatial crack rapidly spread out. However, in the eyes of the people in Peach Blossom Dock, this scene was nothing special. They had already personally experienced the scene of heaven and earth collapsing, so why would they be afraid of this? It pales in comparison to a great one. The sword in Chu Liyue's hand suddenly slashed out. A silver light blade quickly flew out. In the blink of an eye, the light blade cut into the barrier. When the crowd saw this, they were all at a loss. What was Chu Liyue thinking? Was he planning to break the barrier by himself? However, in the next moment, everything that happened in front of them shocked them on the spot. After the light blade came into contact with the barrier, it didn't cut it open. Instead, like water, it quickly melted away. Then, layers of ripples appeared on the barrier. Poof! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the light blade rushed out of the barrier again. It went straight for Nan Yifun. Its appearance was too sudden. Everyone present didn't expect that Chu Liyue's attack could be sent out in such a manner. Moreover, the aura on the light blade didn't weaken at all. It seemed to have strengthened. Nan Yifun was also taken aback. He had already sensed the astonishing aura on it. However, at this time there was no reason to retreat. He clenched his teeth and madly urged the power in his body, pouring all of it into his fist. Clang! A crisp sound of collision was heard. The light blade struck Nan Yifun's fist with incomparable precision. Because of the protection of the purple cloud armor, Nan Yifun wasn't directly injured by the light blade. However, his situation wasn't much better. The impact of the light blade was too strong, and it directly shook his entire palm until it was numb. The power of both sides began to fiercely clash, devouring each other. At a certain moment, Nan Yifun turned his wrist. Whoosh! An ear-piercing scraping sound was heard and sparks flew everywhere. Nan Yifun took a step to the side, quickly bypassed this power, and continued to move forward. His speed was extremely fast. Almost in an instant he came in front of the barrier again. He changed his fist into a claw. Sharp purple scales covered his fingertips and they were extremely sharp. He directly stretched out his hand, intending to tear the barrier apart by force. However, at this moment he suddenly heard a sharp whistle in his ear. He turned around to look and saw that the light blade that he had just avoided had also changed direction at this moment and was flying towards him at lightning speed. Nan Yifun was shocked. It could be like this. However, he didn't know that Chu Liyue had personally refined Scarlet Cloud Sword Soul, so naturally, it could do whatever it wanted. If one attack didn't work, it would come again. Nan Yifun didn't have time to think about tearing the barrier apart anymore, and hurriedly dodged. Although his speed was very fast, the light blade came too suddenly. He couldn't completely avoid it. The light blade flashed quickly, and instantly left a bloody mark on his left shoulder. Excruciating pain instantly assaulted him. Nan Yifun subconsciously looked at the wound on his shoulder. An inch-long scar could be seen on it. Flesh and blood rolled. Blood gushed out and soon his clothes were dyed red. Nan Yifun held it tightly and finally couldn't help but shout, "What are you all still standing there for?" Only then did the people of the Nan family wake up from their dream, and they all moved out. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. More than a dozen experts of the Nan family stood in the air one by one, facing Chu Luiyue, who was standing at the gate. Just as they were about to pursue, the light blade had already flown back and quietly merged into the barrier. The Nan family members missed. Nan Yifun's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Chu Luiyue was simply playing with them. The people of the family Yi were watching from the side. Yi Wentao had one hand behind his back, looking calm as if he didn't intend to make a move. Many people of the family Yi looked at each other. They were not stupid. It was true that the family head came here for Peach Blossom Dock, but obviously he had some connection with the Nan family. Thinking back to when Nan Yifun suddenly came to the family Yi, what the two talked about at that time, it was almost self-evident. However, the Nan family had already made a move. Were they going to keep watching? Jun Jiuqing suddenly took half a step forward and said, "Family head, I think this time, we'd better end the battle quickly. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network." Chapter 1942. Yi Wentao turned around and glanced at him. "Oh. Peach Blossom Dock may not be a problem now, but they have many backers. The situation will only be more difficult to deal with," Jun Jiuqing said concisely. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but nod and agree. "That's right. Big brother, not to mention the Yuntian Tower Xuanhuan alone is difficult to deal with. The mythical beast she contracted is the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Just Chu Luiyue alone wasn't enough to scare them. But the key was that she did have an extremely powerful backer. If it was delayed until then, I'm afraid," Yi Wentao pondered for a moment. It was not that he had not considered this problem. From the moment he agreed to join forces with Nan Yifun, he had already anticipated countless possibilities and the various situations he would face. Naturally, this included these. However, since he had already made this choice, it proved that he had thought it through very clearly. He knew which was more important. "Let's wait a little longer," he said. Seeing that he was still so calm, Yi Wenzhua and the others became anxious. Wait, what were they waiting for? At this time, wasn't the best choice to attack Peach Blossom Dock as soon as possible? However, no matter how everyone reacted, Yi Wentao's expression and attitude remained the same. Seeing him like this, no one said anything else. In the family Yi, almost no one had ever disobeyed his words. It was the same at this time. Yi Wenzhua frowned and wanted to persuade him again, but in the end he chose to give up and sighed helplessly. He couldn't understand what his big brother was thinking. What was there to see if the Nan family and Chu Luiyue were fighting? Jun Jiuqing glanced at Yi Wentao and found that his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. He seemed to be focused. He suddenly thought of something and followed Yi Wentao's gaze. What was he looking at? Or was he waiting for something? Everyone from the Nan family moved out and began to try to break the enchantment of the Peach Blossom Dock. For a time, all kinds of colors intertwined. The rumbling continued without end. However, no matter how they tried, the barrier remained as stable as ever. Apart from a few ripples caused by the impact of the energy, there wasn't even a single crack on it. Everyone's expression gradually turned ugly. Those who had been criticizing Nan Yifun in their hearts at the beginning finally understood why he had returned in defeat the previous 2 times he had acted. There was something wrong with this barrier. The Nan family could be considered the top aristocratic family in the Divine Ruins, but even they themselves did not dare to say that their barrier was stronger than the one in front of them. Furthermore, it was clear that this barrier was controlled by Chu Luiyue alone. She could control the barrier as she pleased. No wonder it was rumored that Peach Blossom Dock is now Xuanhuan's territory. This barrier belonged to her and was under her control. Wasn't this the same as holding the entire Peach Blossom Dock in her hands? Was there anything she couldn't do? That's really strange. She's just a supreme deity. How did she do all this? I heard that there was a riot in Peach Blossom Dock and it caused a big commotion. Since then it has been like this. I wonder what Xuanhuan did at that time? Everyone was puzzled. They were really curious. If we can't break this barrier, are we going to waste our time like this? That would be too embarrassing. At this moment, the sound of something being torn apart was suddenly heard. Whoosh, everyone looked over, only to see that Nan Yifun had arrived in front of the enchantment once again. He forcefully tore open the barrier with one hand and reached inside. Digression. The computer was down for a while. Let's read more first. 7 o'clock. I'll write down what I owe in a small notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1943. Nan Yifun was holding a short blade in his hand. The short blade was only as long as an adult's palm. It was purple in color and had a cold luster. It was extremely sharp. Almost silently, the tough enchantment was cut open. Nan Yifan was overjoyed when he saw this. He only wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect to succeed. The opportunity couldn't be missed. Nan Yifan immediately mobilized more power and slashed fiercely. That crack was instantly lengthened. Without any hesitation, he entered in a flash. Hurry up! Everyone from the Nan family was also very excited when they saw this. They hurriedly rushed over, intending to rush in with Nan Yuxing. However, just as Nan Yifan entered the barrier, that long crack began to recover at an astonishing speed. It gathered together again. Ripples of light rippled, looking no different from the beginning. The Nan family members who wanted to follow in were immediately blocked outside and were given the cold shoulder. The few people who rushed in front tried to open the barrier again, but it was in vain. Nan Yifan heard the commotion and turned back to take a look. When he saw that the barrier had returned to normal in the blink of an eye, his eyelids twitched fiercely. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in his heart. Nan family head is really powerful, to be able to break my Peach Blossom Cove's barrier so easily. Chu Liyue's smiling voice sounded. Nan Yifan suddenly realized something and his heart sank. Oh no. He fell into a trap. He broke into this barrier alone, which was tantamount to a sheep entering a tiger's den. Yo, cunning. Nan Yifan was enraged. Chu Liyue was still smiling. You flatter me. Compared to Nan family head's temperament and methods, I'm still lacking. These words were mocking him for killing Nan Yi for Nan Yuxing. Nan Yifan's chest felt like it had been hammered by something and he couldn't breathe. He stabbed with a backhand. Ripples appeared on the barrier, but it wasn't cut open like before. She did it on purpose before. Nan Yifan's heart was filled with hatred. He didn't expect that Chu Liyue would still be able to use such a sinister move at this time. Seeing that the barrier couldn't be opened, Nan Yifan's mind raced and he quickly made a decision. Since I'm already here, I might as well fight them to the death. Today, even if he had to pay with his life, he would absolutely not let these people have an easy time. Nan Yifan's gaze slowly swept over Luo Yan and the others, full of resentment. These 4 people had all betrayed the Nan family. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have brought them along. If that was the case, Yuxing might not have died. Nan Yifan's heart was filled with regret and anger. Finally, his gaze fell on Chu Liyue. The culprit behind all of this was her. If looks could kill, Chu Liyue would have been riddled with holes by now. However, she had been trained over the years, so she didn't take Nan Yifan's reaction seriously. Xuanhuan, you do have some skills. However, if you think that you can look down on everyone and be the best in the world just because of these, you are too naive. Chu Liyue explained sincerely. Patriarch Nan, you misunderstood me. I'm not an arrogant person, I don't think you're worthy of my attention. What's there to say to an enemy? If she didn't kill them, they would kill her. She would never hesitate to make such a choice. Nan Yifan gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He knew it. He shouldn't have said so much to Chu Liyue. Otherwise, in the end, he would probably die from anger before anything could happen. Arrogant to the extreme. Nan Yifan scolded sternly. If you really have the guts, fight with me. If you win, you can kill me or cut me up as you wish. If you lose, Patriarch Nan, have you been too sad about the deaths of your children that your mind has become muddled? Chu Liyue interrupted him and asked curiously. You came to me to die, but you want me to fight with you alone? Why would I agree to such a request of yours? In this situation, Nan Yifan was doomed. That was why he said those words in a moment of desperation. But Chu Liyue was not stupid. Besides, you're a god and you said those words to me, a superior god. Patriarch Nan, even if you don't feel embarrassed, I feel ashamed for you. Chu Liyue said with a faint smile. Nan Yifan's face turned red and white. He was really in a difficult situation now. Go back? The boundary couldn't be opened. Go forward? There were so many people there. Even if he was a god, he was no match for them. He was sweating profusely and his body was cold. Rong Xiu, who had been watching from the side, suddenly spoke. Patriarch Family Patriarch Nan has fallen into such a situation. Are you still not going to do anything? This sentence was as cold and indifferent as usual, but it instantly silenced everyone inside and outside the boundary. Almost everyone subconsciously looked at Wentao. In fact, at this time, who couldn't see his purpose of coming here? Now that Nan Yifan couldn't even protect himself, he still didn't do anything. Could it be that he was just going to watch Nan Yifan throw his life away? Wentao heard this and turned his eyes slightly. He and Rong Xiu looked at each other for a moment. That pair of eyes was like a calm pool of water, soaked with a bit of coldness that made people feel cold. Yuantao's heart moved. He was still afraid of Rong Xiu, however at this moment, Nan Yifan suddenly rushed toward Chu Luiyue. He waved his hand and the short blade instantly flew out. A piercing pain hit him in the face. Chu Luiyue's heart moved, and the armillary shield appeared in front of him. Yuantao's pupils suddenly shrank. Digression. Today's update is overdue. Facing the wall to reflect on one's mistakes, a better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1945. However, at this moment, a green figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. At the same time that person waved his sleeve. A palm-sized transparent jade bangle flew out from his hand. The next moment, everyone saw that the short blade that Nan Yifan threw out actually changed direction inexplicably and flew towards the transparent jade bangle. The closer it got, the slower its speed became, as if it had fallen into an invisible swamp. Ding! That short blade hit the inner edge of the transparent jade bangle, making a faint crisp sound, then completely stopped. Nan Yifan was shocked. When he threw this short blade he used all his strength. Even if it couldn't kill Chu Luiyue, logically speaking, it should be able to leave a wound on her body. One must know that this short blade was no ordinary item. Even if Chu Luiyue had some ability, it would be very difficult for her to block it. In the end, not only did this thing not injure Chu Luiyue, but it was also easily dealt with by another person. At the same time, a tyrannical pressure swept over. Nan Yifan was forced to stop. He immediately looked at the person who attacked, his brows tightly knitted. Sini. He remembered this person. This was Chu Luiyue's subordinate. From beginning to end, he had been following Chu Luiyue. Only when he went to escort Luo Yan and the others, he left for a moment. However, from these matters, it wasn't hard to see that he should be Chu Luiyue's right-hand man, and his status here wasn't low. It was just that, how could he be so strong? Nan Yifan's attention had always been on Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu. From beginning to end he didn't even look at Sun Yi. Until now when Sun Yi attacked. How could an ordinary person block his attack so easily? Nan Yifan began to carefully examine Sun Yi. However, Sun Yi didn't seem to care about this. With a flick of his wrist, he put away the transparent jade bangle. Let me see that short blade, Chu Luiyue said. Sun Yi made a sound of agreement, handing over the dagger with both hands. Chu Luiyue carefully examined the purple dagger in his hand. After a while he revealed a meaningful smile. Patriarch Nan is really capable. You can even use the dragon scales of the great phoenix dragon race to make a weapon? No wonder when Nan Yifan took out this thing she felt that it was somewhat familiar. This dagger was made from the dragon scales of the great phoenix dragon race. However, he didn't know what method Nan Yifan had used to get his hands on this thing. Nan Yifan's expression was cold. It has nothing to do with you. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows and played with the dagger. You intended to use this thing to harm my life. How is it unrelated to me? Besides. Furthermore, this dragon scale was no ordinary dragon scale. It was hard to say what other secrets were hidden here. However, Chu Luiyue did not say these words out loud. Nan Yifan didn't intend to talk to Chu Luiyue anymore. His expression changed. After a short pause he attacked again. From the looks of it he was determined to kill Chu Luiyue. Sun Yi heard the commotion behind him and cupped his fists. There's no need to trouble Master to do such a small thing. Chu Luiyue thought for a while and nodded. All right. I haven't seen you fight in a long time. At this point she suddenly turned around. A youth was standing at the city gate staring at them. Chu Luiyue waved. 13, come here. She had sensed 13's arrival just now. However, he was very sensible and knew that the situation was complicated. He didn't go forward and just stood inside to watch. Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, 13's eyes lit up and he immediately ran over. He didn't think about danger or anything. Master and Big Brother were both here. What was there to worry about? Master? 13 came over. He was still a little confused. He didn't know why Chu Luiyue had asked him to come over. Chu Luiyue raised her chin and gestured for him to stand beside the guards at the city gate. All right, just stand there. 13 walked over obediently and stood still. It's rare for your big brother to fight. It's a rare opportunity. You have to watch carefully. Chu Luiyue said with a smile. 13 was delighted and quickly nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue nodded in relief. This child was teachable. Besides, she also wanted to see how strong Sun Yi was now. On one hand she could teach 13. On the other hand she could solve the doubts in her heart. Finally she could make Nan Yifan suffer a little. Why not kill several birds with one stone? Everyone was at a loss at first, then they were shocked. At this time, Chu Luiyue still had the time to think about this? Nan Yifan was also about to go crazy. The veins on his forehead were throbbing wildly. He only felt that he had been greatly humiliated. What did Chu Luiyue mean by this? She didn't like him? She didn't even make a move herself and only sent one of her subordinates. There seemed to be a flame burning wildly between his chest and abdomen. Nan Yifan instantly sped up again. Sun Yi turned around and looked at the rapidly approaching Nan Yifan. Then he moved his feet and sprinted forward. From the looks of it, he was planning to fight Nan Yifan head-on. Most of the onlookers had complicated expressions. Chu Luiyue was too arrogant, and her subordinate had the same temperament as her. Who was Nan Yifan? The head of the Nan family. He was a top expert who had broken through to the god level decades ago. This Sun Yi looked to be in his 20s and was very young. Even if he had some strength, how could he be compared to Nan Yifan who had combat experience? This was simply courting death. Nan Yifan quickly mobilized the power in his body. In fact, after experiencing those things before, he didn't dare to let his guard down anymore. This Sun Yi could take his moves so easily, which proved that he definitely had some strength. At this moment he couldn't slack off at all. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth began to surge toward Nan Yifan. The aura on his body also became stronger. Sun Yi's long, narrow and indifferent eyes narrowed slightly. But compared to Nan Yifan, there was almost no movement on his side. The distance between the two was rapidly shrinking. Nan Yifan suddenly stretched out a finger. A clear sound that seemed to come from the depths of the underworld came from afar. Underworld finger. His index finger had unknowingly turned a dark purple color, and a mysterious pattern vaguely appeared. At the same time, the Nan family totem flashed between his eyebrows. Sun Yi's expression didn't change as he directly punched out. Flowing wind fist. His fist was covered with a layer of green light that flowed slowly like water. Under the sunlight, it even sparkled and sparkled. His movements were swift and unrestrained like a gentle breeze, and it revealed an indescribable feeling of freedom. Then the two of them clashed. Boom. The power of both sides fiercely collided. Violent and unbridled energy quickly spread out in all directions. A layer of intertwined green and purple light exploded, instantly enveloping the two of them. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1946. Almost everyone's gaze landed on the two of them, eagerly waiting for the outcome. However, there was one person whose attention was not on them. That person was Yi Wentao. After seeing Chu Luiyue summon the Armillary Heaven Shield, his heart was in his mouth, waiting for her to make a move. However, he did not expect that Chu Luiyue would not make a move. Instead, Sun Yi appeared out of nowhere and went against Nan Yifan. This made Yi Wentao's mood very bad. However, his expression did not change at all, and he continued to watch with an indifferent expression. Xuanhuan's subordinate is not ordinary, he suddenly said. Of all the times to make a move, he chose to make a move now. Moreover, based on his previous observation, this Sun Yi's strength should not be underestimated. Yi Wentao frowned. I heard that Xuanhuan brought him back from outside the Divine Ruins world. I didn't know that she had such a person by her side. Yi Wentao's eyesight was not weak. He had clearly seen how Sun Yi had received Nan Yifan's attack. He was certain that Sun Yi's strength was definitely not to be underestimated. However, the more it was so, the more sullen Yi Wentao felt. Chu Luiyue was really too strange. Not only was she always stronger than everyone expected, but even the people she brought with her kept showing up. Every time everyone thought that they knew her well enough, she would always do something even more shocking and reveal more trump cards. Who knew that this time, suddenly, a silhouette flew out from the intertwined ball of fire. Bang! His body fell heavily to the ground. There was a muffled sound. Everyone hurriedly looked over. When they saw that face clearly, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The person who was knocked to the ground was actually Nan Yifan. At this moment he was lying on the ground, his face pale, and he kept vomiting blood. As for his index finger, it had actually been broken off. At this moment, it was drooping at a strange angle, dripping with blood. He looked like he was in a very sorry state. Everyone was stunned, and they fell into deathly silence in unison. He originally thought that Nan Yifan would win for sure. Who knew that in just one round he would be defeated? Immediately after, a green figure flew out from the ball of fire. Countless gazes looked over, yet they discovered that Sun Yi, who had similarly experienced an intense battle, was actually not stained by the slightest bit of blood. He floated in midair and his green clothes were upright. The space between his brows was indifferent and cold, yet it revealed an indescribable icy cold noble aura. He looked down at Nan Yifan from above. Admit defeat? No one expected that the one to say this would actually be Cini. He was just one of Chu Liyue's subordinates. If even he was so powerful, then Chu Liyue, Nan Yifan struggled to stand up, coughing incessantly. Hearing Cini's words, he spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood. How high and mighty were these 3 words? It was almost like a few resounding slaps on his face. Nan Yifan endured the pain coming from all over his body and looked up. A cold smile suddenly appeared on his face. Admit defeat? Dream on. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly bit the tip of his tongue. The purple short blade in Chu Liyue's hand suddenly cracked. Crack. Chu Liyue quickly looked down. A dragon's roar suddenly came from within. Almost at the same time, the void beside Nan Yifan shook violently. A figure walked out from within. Nan family head, is there something you need from me? Nan Yifan swallowed a mouthful of blood and said word by word. Elder Fushan, you have to help me this time. Digression. It's time to compare whose backer is more powerful. Come at 6. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1947. Looking at Nan Yifan's miserable appearance, Miao Fushan frowned. What happened to Patriarch Nan? According to his identity, he shouldn't have been reduced to such a state. Moreover, to be able to force Nan Yifan to use the dragon scale and summon him here, it must have been a critical moment. As Miao Fushan asked, he quickly sized up everything around him. At first glance, he saw Chu Liyue, who was holding the broken dragon scale in his hand. Then he was slightly startled. This situation doesn't seem right no matter what. Nan Yifan's next words immediately confirmed his guess. Elder Fushan, the matter is like this. Xuanhuan and Rongxiu killed my son and daughter as well as several patriarchs of the Nan family. I originally wanted to lead people to seek an explanation, but I didn't expect them to be so cunning. They even bewitched the patriarchs of the Nan family who were previously detained and made them pour all the dirty water on me. Elder Fushan, all these years I have never dared to disturb you, but this time, I really have no choice. Chu Liyue was amazed. What was called inverting black and white? What was called a glib tongue? The evidence was conclusive, but he could still say such words. He was really not an ordinary person. Chu Liyue began to understand how he could sit on the patriarch's seat for so long. As Miao Fushan listened, the expression on his face became more and more subtle. Only when Nan Yifan finished speaking did he nod his head. Then he took a few steps forward. Everyone looked over with different expressions on their faces. In the entire Divine Ruins world, there was only one Elder Fushan. The Great Phoenix Dragon Clan's elder, Miao Fushan. This was a well-known figure. It was rumored that his seniority was extremely high, and his position in the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan was very honorable. Even the patriarch would respect him. For Nan Yifan to be able to invite him, he was indeed a great backer. Even the people of the Nan family were shocked and at a loss when they saw this situation. They never knew that Nan Yifan had a relationship with Miao Fushan. With this person, even if Chu Liyue's contracted magical beast was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, he should still be slightly inferior, right? Thinking of this, many people's eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. Nan Yifan wiped the bloodstain from the corner of his mouth and looked at Chu Liyue with even more coldness and complacency. However, Miao Fushan's next action shocked everyone. He cupped his fists and bowed to Rongxiu and Chu Liyue. Saint, Princess Consort, long time no see. How have you been? His attitude was extremely courteous, and there was even a hint of familiarity. It was as if he was meeting an acquaintance. Nan Yifan's smile froze on his face. He looked at Miao Fushan in disbelief. He had invited him here to deal with Chu Liyue and the others. But what was with this reaction? Rongxiu nodded and raised his thin lips. It's been a while since we last met. Elder Fushan is even more spirited than before. Chu Liyue's eyes curved up. Yes. It seems that Elder Fushan has been quite happy during this period of time? Miao Fushan waved his hand and smiled bitterly. Don't make fun of this old man, you two. Some time ago, I was busy with the clan's affairs and couldn't get away. This old man couldn't even personally attend your wedding. I hope you two can forgive me. Mao Jin naturally had to clean up Mao Yang's henchmen in the clan. Therefore, the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan was quite shaken during this period of time. He had just calmed down when Nan Yifan invited him over again. Rongxiu smiled. Elder Fushan is too polite. You are an elder. I should have taken you, back to Divine Dragon Island, but I didn't expect to see you here before I could go back. While the three of them were talking, the onlookers were all stunned. Why did it seem like Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue had a better relationship with Miao Fushan? The more Nan Yifan watched, the more panicked he became. He faintly felt that he seemed to have missed something important. The entire Divine Ruins world knew that Rong Xiao and Nan Yifan had dealings with the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. After all, Patriarch Mao Zhen had personally gone to congratulate them on their wedding. But Nan Yifan had always thought that they were at most acquaintances and were far from close. After all, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had always been arrogant and rarely had any dealings with the human race. But now, yes. I didn't expect Elder Fushan to be familiar with Patriarch Nan. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Miao Fushan sighed in his heart. It's a long story. Many years ago, this old man had the chance to meet the Nan family head. At that time, I was in a dangerous situation and Patriarch Nan helped me out. Therefore, I left behind a dragon scale as a token and promised that if Patriarch Nan needs any help in the future, he can just shatter this dragon scale. In other words, there was only one chance like this. But this time it was enough to make many envious and jealous. After all, this was Miao Fushan. It was difficult for many people to see him, let alone others. But Nan Yifan could ask for his help. Even if it was thousands of miles away, Miao Fushan would immediately rush over. The gap between them wasn't small at all. Nan Yifan knew how precious this opportunity was, so he had cherished it all these years and had never used it. Until this time, when he was forced into a corner and had no way out, he finally used this trump card. But now, it seemed that the development of the matter had deviated from the direction he had expected. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and looked at Rong Xiao. No wonder. Logically speaking, a person like Miao Fushan would not have any contact with Nan Yifan. It turned out that there was such a reason. I just didn't expect to meet the two of you this time. Miao Fushan also did not expect to face such an awkward situation. Chu Luiyue asked with a smile. Then, Elder Fushan, do you plan to help Patriarch Nan? This question was the question in everyone's mind. For a moment, there was silence inside and outside the field. Everyone was waiting for Miao Fushan's answer. His choice, to a large extent, would determine the direction of today's matter. Miao Fushan smiled helplessly. Princess, don't tease me. I don't care about others but the two of you. I can't beat you. If the Patriarch were to find out about this, he would definitely be furious. This sentence was a clear indication of his attitude. Nan Yifan suddenly became anxious and hurriedly took a few steps forward. Elder Fushan? What do you mean by this? He was the one who invited him here first, and it was clearly an agreement made many years ago. But in the end, Miao Fushan was still standing opposite those people? Miao Fushan stroked his beard helplessly. Patriarch Nan, you've really made things difficult for me this time. If it was any other matter, I would naturally be duty-bound, but this time, I really can't do it. Nan Yifan wanted to explain, but he continued. Princess is already half a family member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. How can you beat her? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1948. Each and every word echoed clearly in everyone's ears. It was like a thunderclap. Everyone was stunned on the spot, unable to regain their senses for a long time. They almost thought that they had misheard. Half a family? Half a family? Who exactly was Chu Luiyue? What kind of ability did he have to make Miao Fushan say such words? Nan Yifan was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Miao Fushan with a shocked expression. He opened his mouth, but the thousands of words in his throat could not come out. Miao Fushan said, This old man does owe Nan family head a favor, but how can I beat up my own family for an outsider? Nan family head, don't you think so? If Miao Fushan's previous words were tactful, then this sentence completely cut off the last trace of hope in Nan Yifan's heart. Family. Outsider. It was clear who was close and who was distant. This time this old man has let Nan family head down. So if Nan family head needs any help in the future, just ask, and this old man will do his best to help. But this time, please forgive this old man, I really can't help. Miao Fushan said. As compensation, the previous one help will be changed to 2. What do you think, Nan family head? What do you think? He had already made his decision, so why was he still asking for his opinion? Nan Yifan sneered in his heart. Would Miao Fushan take back his words if he said no? More importantly, if Miao Fushan did not help, then he, Nan Yifan, might not even be able to live past today. Even if he had 2, 3 or even more opportunities, what was the use? Ridiculous. At this moment, Nan Yifan's limbs were cold, but his chest was boiling hot, as if something was rushing back and forth in his lungs, and was about to burst out. A warm, sweet and fishy taste suddenly surged up his throat. He forced it down. There had never been a moment like this where he felt like a clown. Miao Fushan's words were like a slap to his face, and it was burning with pain. At this time, the people standing outside the barrier were not any better than Nan Yifan. Miao Fushan said, Chu Luiyue was a member of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. She was a human. More importantly, her contracted mythological beast was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It might make sense if she was half a member of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, but as for the Great Phoenix Dragon, in the entire Divine Ruins world, who didn't know that the relationship between these two primordial Divine Beast clans had always been very subtle. On the surface, everyone seemed to be minding their own business, but in reality, they were all openly and secretly competing against each other. The Great Phoenix Dragon actually treated Chu Luiyue as one of its own. Did they even consider the existence of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? Moreover, why hadn't they heard anything about such a big thing before? Even Yi Wentao, who had always been calm, frowned when he heard this. Yi Wentao had been secretly paying attention to these two primordial divine beast clans, but he hadn't heard anything about them. Why would Chu Luiyue have such a close relationship with them out of the blue? What was more troublesome was that Miao Fushan's status was noble, and his attitude basically represented the attitude of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan. If the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Phoenix Dragon came to support at the same time, then, at that time it would be difficult to handle. Yi Wentao slowly clenched his fists. Chu Luiyue was actually a little surprised that Miao Fushan would say such a thing directly. Thinking about it carefully, it was probably because of Mao Jin's attitude. Because of Zi Qin, she was indeed close to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it was very rare for Miao Fushan to be willing to say such a thing. One could imagine that this sentence would definitely spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world. It could be said that they were standing behind her and supporting her openly. To the Great Phoenix Dragon race, this was indeed an extremely important decision. Chu Luiyue never thought that others should help her. Therefore, she was actually very grateful that Miao Fushan was willing to do this. Thank you, Elder Fushan. She sighed softly. Actually, what Patriarch Nan said earlier was not true. Following that, she briefly recounted the events that had transpired earlier. Originally, she didn't want to say much, but Miao Fushan's attitude surprised and made her very grateful. Therefore, she felt that she should tell the truth. As for whom Miao Fushan believed, it was up to him. The more Miao Fushan listened, the tighter his frown became. By the end, his face was ashen. He suddenly turned around and stared at Nan Yifan. Patriarch Nan, is this all true? A trace of panic flashed in Nan Yifan's eyes, but he still said stubbornly. Since Elder Fushan has chosen to stand on their side, why ask me this? He put on a look of contempt and mockery as if Miao Fushan was going back on his word. But who was Miao Fushan? Nan Yifan's disguise was completely useless in front of him. With just a few more glances, Miao Fushan had already guessed his thoughts. His expression turned cold. It was no problem for Nan Yifan to ask him for help. It was also no problem for Nan Yifan to be the one in the wrong. But he couldn't tolerate Nan Yifan lying. Nan Yifan felt guilty under Miao Fushan's gaze and subconsciously looked away. After a while, Miao Fushan said indifferently, Patriarch Nan, since you helped me before, I won't pursue today's deceit. But from now on, between you and me, it's written off. Patriarch Nan, you'd better pray for yourself. With that, he flicked his sleeves fiercely and turned to walk in the direction of Chu Luiyue and the others. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Elder Fushan, it's a great thing that the princess consort can take down Peach Blossom Dock. A smile appeared on Miao Fushan's face. This matter had been spreading like wildfire in the Divine Ruins world recently, so he naturally heard about it too. He had long thought that the other families of the human race might take action, but he didn't expect that these two families would be the first to take action. And it just so happened that he was summoned here. Since it was such a coincidence, he might as well stay here and help. Since it's a wonderful thing, I naturally won't allow others to ruin it. Although this old man is an old bag of bones, but this little bit of help can still be of help. I hope the Holy Sun and Princess Consort won't mind. He said that he wouldn't do anything to Nan Yifan, but he didn't say that he would do the same to others. After weighing the two, he naturally had to help Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was also quite surprised. What are you talking about, Elder Fushan? We should be thanking you. Although she had her own plan, Miao Fushan's willingness to help greatly increased their chances of winning. Nan Yifan almost fainted when he heard this. Digression, come back at 7 o'clock. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1949. After a long time, not only did they not manage to invite any helpers, they even had one more enemy. And it was an extremely powerful one. Nan Yifan felt that everything seemed to be a ghost when it came to Chu Luiyue. He had hidden this trump card for many years, and now that he had finally used it, it was ruined by Chu Luiyue with just a few words. He could not understand how Chu Luiyue managed to be on good terms with two ancient divine beast clans at the same time. Moreover, it was not just a normal relationship, but a close relationship that allowed them to help anytime and anywhere. Nan Yifan was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he would never have invited Miao Fushan over. But now it was too late to say anything. Miao Fushan's appearance and declaration had caused a great change in the situation. If they had dared to give it their all before, they were now somewhat hesitant. The great phoenix dragon was a divine beast. Originally, Chu Luiyue had already contracted the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, which was already troublesome enough. Now, with the addition of the great phoenix dragon, for Nan Yifan and the others, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. Yes, Family E and Nan family's status and foundation were higher than those first-rate families. But compared to these two divine beast clans, they were still inferior. Not to mention that these two clans were even more powerful when they joined forces. How could they continue to fight? Family Head, do you think we should continue? Someone from Family E whispered. The current situation was a little troublesome. Fortunately, they had not made a move yet. If they left now, they might be able to avoid this battle. Yi Wentao turned around and glanced at the person who spoke. His eyebrows moved slightly and he said lightly, "You want to leave?" The person who spoke suddenly shuddered. No, no. Although the family head's expression did not change, there was an inexplicable coldness that made one's heart turn cold. The people around wanted to say a few words of agreement, but when they heard Yi Wentao's question, they suddenly stopped talking. After spending so much effort to come here, if we leave quietly, how can Family E establish a foothold in the Divine Ruins world in the future? Yi Wentao's voice did not fluctuate, but it immediately alerted everyone. Yes. Since he had already come this far, how could he leave just because he said so? Everything that had happened here today would quickly spread throughout the Divine Ruins as if it had grown wings. At that time, how would those people think of Family E? Furthermore, they had come here for the Peach Blossom Dock. If he missed this opportunity, he didn't know when he would be able to find such a perfect place again. No matter from what perspective, they could only choose to continue. A sound of air breaking suddenly came from behind. Nan Yifan suddenly came back to his senses, but before he could do anything, a cold green light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. He knew something was wrong, but there was no time to dodge. An ice-cold stab of pain instantly came from his lower abdomen. His body to stop his eyes. A bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared on his body, and blood was gushing out. His clothes were already stained with blood, but at this moment, a large amount of blood was gushing out, quickly soaking his clothes and sticking them tightly to his body. Furthermore, blood was constantly dripping down, making him look even more ghastly. Intense pain quickly spread through his body. At the same time, the rich force seemed to have lost control as it surged out of his body. Nan Yifan's mind went blank for a moment. His core of essence had shattered. He was almost forcing himself to look back. Sun Yi had appeared behind him without him noticing. A transparent jade bangle was floating quietly in front of him. It was the same one he had used to block Nan Yifan's short blade. However, the jade bangle was now stained with a few drops of blood, which were slowly dripping down along the arc on it. It was obvious that the wound on Nan Yifan's body was caused by this thing. Nan Yifan's eyes widened in disbelief and deep resentment. How could this be? When Sun Yi attacked, why didn't he sense it at all? If he had reacted earlier, his core of essence wouldn't have been shattered so accurately. Sun Yi looked at him with a cold and indifferent expression, as though he was looking at an ant. He clearly didn't say anything, but Nan Yifan could feel that Sun Yi looked down on him. Nan Yifan became more and more furious, but at the same time he also felt great fear. He had to admit that Sun Yi's strength was indeed above his. From start to finish, the two of them had only exchanged 2 moves. Sun Yi had directly placed him in such a situation. Although part of the reason for this was because Nan Yifan himself wasn't alert enough, If Cini wasn't strong enough, he definitely wouldn't have succeeded. What was more terrifying was that such a powerful figure was actually Chu Liyue's subordinate. He was willing to follow Chu Liyue and bow down to her. Why was that? Nan Yifan couldn't understand. But he was unwilling. Finally, his body couldn't support itself and fell down. But his knees heavily knelt on the ground with a dull thud. This kneeling also directly smashed into the hearts of the Nan family members. For a moment there was dead silence. Just then, a face suddenly appeared in Nan Yifan's peripheral vision. Yuantao. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Yuantao narrowed his eyes slightly. Nan Yifan suddenly thought of something, and a ruthless look flashed across his eyes. Boom. A ball of flame suddenly exploded from his body. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1950. The flame was pure white, and as it burned, there were specks of silver light flickering within it. The flame burrowed out of Nan Yifan's body and quickly engulfed his entire body. In the blink of an eye, he became a flaming man. However, unlike other flames, this silver-white flame was not boiling hot. Instead, it carried traces of cold air. On the ground where Nan Yifan was, the sporadic drips of blood gradually froze and were covered with a thin layer of frost. Then Nan Yifan stood up again. Through the silver-white flame, Chu Liyue could vaguely see that Nan Yifan's body was undergoing some kind of change. He just stood there, allowing the flame to burn wildly on his body. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth continuously surged toward him and merged with the flame. As time passed, Nan Yifan's aura, which had been much more dispirited, began to gradually recover. Chu Liyue frowned. Rongxiu said. He's summoning his divine body. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, then suddenly understood. His divine body seems to be a little different from others. The Nan family had always been a rather mysterious existence in the Divine Ruins world, so there were not many rumors about Nan Yifan himself. Outsiders basically had no way of understanding him. As for what kind of divine body he had cultivated, it was naturally even more unknown. Chu Liyue had seen many types of divine bodies in the ancient books of Lingxiao College, but none of them were the same as Nan Yifan's divine body in front of him. In just a short while, Nan Yifan's aura and pressure seemed to be comparable to when he had first appeared. More importantly, his aura was still rising. After the silver-white flame burned fiercely, it began to gradually return to Nan Yifan's body. Only then did Chu Liyue see that most of the wounds on his body had healed. Even the wound on his abdomen that Cini had left behind had mostly healed and was beginning to scab. Chu Liyue frowned. Nan Yifan's injuries were very serious, especially since his core of essence had been shattered. Logically speaking, he should have lost all his attacking power and could no longer fight. Who knew? At this moment, Nan Yifan raised his head and looked straight at Chu Liyue. Only then did Chu Liyue see that his face and neck were covered with a thin layer of frost. Looking from afar, he looked like he had turned into an ice man. A thin layer of frost penetrated through, revealing a bone-piercing chill. As for his eyes, they had turned silvery white. When she met that pair of eyes, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly shrank. Cold, bloodthirsty, crazy. It was as if it wanted to devour everything. A trace of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart, and she immediately circulated the origin power around her body. Cini waved his sleeve and the transparent jade bracelet rushed towards Nan Yifan once more. However, this time Nan Yifan reacted immediately. He raised his hand and punched out. Clang. The incomparably hard fist fiercely collided with the transparent jade bracelet, emitting a clear and crisp sound. The transparent jade bracelet instantly flew out, and the ground beneath Nan Yifan's feet instantly cracked, causing his feet to sink in a little. However, his fist was unscathed. His body did not seem to have suffered any substantial damage either. One must know that his core of origin was already shattered, and he could not circulate his origin power at all. At this moment he was purely relying on his divine body to support himself. Chu Liyue frowned. Nan Yifan's divine body was actually this powerful? The transparent jade bracelet flew back, and Cini raised his hand to catch it. Sensing the vibrations of the remaining power on it, his expression turned cold. Nan Yifan had already gone mad. He had directly given up on his physical body and used all his power to fill his divine body. In order to strengthen his divine body, he had even burned his remaining origin power. Doing so was no different from killing the goose that laid the golden eggs. Most importantly, this would cause him great and irreversible damage. He was going all out. Just as this thought flashed through Cini's mind, he saw the last flame on Nan Yifan's body disappear. Then with a tap of his foot, he went straight for Chu Luiyue. Nan Yifan was extremely fast. Chu Luiyue did not even have time to see his movements clearly before she felt a gust of cold wind. She focused her gaze and looked into Nan Yifan's silver-white eyes. A thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Nan Yifan seems to be targeting me? From the beginning until now, she had almost always been on the same side as Rong Xiu and acted together. However, Nan Yifan had always targeted her alone, especially when he attacked. Without exception, all of them were directed at her. Why was this? It could not be because of his so-called fear of Rong Xiu. After all, from the moment he decided to send Nan Yuxing and the others, he had already predicted today's outcome. That meant, he felt that she was weaker than Rong Xiu and easier to deal with? That did not seem right either. Rong Xiu was right beside her and could attack at any time. Moreover, when they barged into Peach Blossom Cove's barrier earlier, they should have already seen some of her strength. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed. Nan Yifan was trying to force her to attack? Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something and turned to look at Yi Wentao. Almost at the same time, Yi Wentao also looked at her. The two of them confronted each other silently. Chu Luiyue instantly confirmed the guess in her heart. There must be some kind of agreement between the two of them. That was why Nan Yifan was so reckless and wanted to face her head on no matter what. Forcing her to attack. What does Yi Wentao want to see? What does he want to know? Chu Luiyue's mind raced. At this moment, Nan Yifan was almost in front of her. That biting cold aura was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. However, at this moment, rays of light suddenly flashed under Nan Yifan's feet. The rays of light were light green and about the thickness of an adult's finger. They intertwined with each other and directly formed a huge net that floated up. Nan Yifan took a step and wanted to avoid it. However, the huge net had already begun to close. At the same time, countless silver needles flew out from it and went straight for Nan Yifan. They covered the sky and covered the earth. Nan Yifan's figure was instantly enveloped. Nan Yifan originally did not care about these attacks because he was very confident in his divine body. Moreover, this time he had used all his strength to raise the strength of his divine body to the maximum. But soon he realized that he had been too optimistic. These silver needles and this huge net are not to be underestimated. Soon, his vision was occupied and his whole person was trapped on the spot, unable to continue forward. At this moment, Cini stepped forward. He slowly raised his hand and then clenched it. Intense pain instantly spread throughout Nan Yifan's body. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1951. This scream was extremely mournful as it spread far and wide, instantly causing the expressions of everyone outside the barrier to change. Because they could clearly see that the green net had suddenly tightened and tightly bound Nan Yifan. At the same time, the countless silver needles on it pierced into his divine body. Although those silver needles were very thin, they were very long and extremely tough. If they pierced directly, even the bones would be pierced. Not to mention being pierced by thousands of silver needles all over his body at the same time. This kind of pain was simply not something an ordinary person could endure. Nan Yifan's divine body trembled violently, but the giant green net tightly bound him, making him unable to move. Everyone could only see that the silver needles that flickered with a cold luster had almost all pierced into his divine body, leaving only the similarly sharp tips trembling slightly. This time, there was no more dark red blood gushing out of Nan Yifan's body, and it stained everywhere. However, everyone still felt a chill in their hearts as they watched. This kind of pain was no different from torture. This Cini, what a ruthless method. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but exclaim in shock. They could all see that there was something fishy about those silver needles. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to pierce through Nan Yifan's divine body so easily. One must know that his divine body was already considered extremely strong. But at this time he was still unable to withstand Sun Yi's attack. You must first have the strength to do this. Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes and said. In the beginning his attention was on Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. It was only later when Chu Luiyue called out to Sun Yi that he realized that this young man in green robes might not be simple. At this time he could finally confirm his previous guess. This Sun Yi, not only was he a Supreme God expert but he was also one of the best among Supreme God experts. Although Yi Wentao and Nan Yifan didn't have much contact, they still had some contact. Therefore he had a basic understanding of Nan Yifan's strength. Not to mention the Nan family, even in the entire Divine Ruins world, there were not many who could defeat Nan Yifan. However, not only did Sun Yi gain the upper hand in the process of exchanging blows with him, it also looked like it was effortless. Even now, Yi Wentao was unable to accurately guess Sun Yi's true strength. In short, he was stronger than Nan Yifan, and not just by a little bit. How come he had never heard of such a person before? Yi Wentao realized that he had come here in a hurry. If I had known earlier, I would have investigated more. However, it was clearly too late to say these things now. If I remember correctly, that Sun Yi seems to be one of Xuanhuan's former subordinates? As for the others, how many of them are currently staying at the Peach Blossom Dock? Yi Wentao suddenly asked. Yi Wenzuo was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Jun Jiuqing reply. Yes. Only then did he realize that the question was directed at Jun Jiuqing. That's true. Sun Yi and the others came from outside the Divine Ruins world. Jun Jiuqing had stayed in the northern underworld for so long, so he should know more about them. Jun Jiuqing continued. She has a personal guard under her, called the 13U Guard. These 13 people were personally selected by her, and they only listened to her orders. Sun Yi is ranked first in the 13U Guard. Yi Wentao's brows furrowed slightly. Are the other members of the so-called 13U Guard as powerful as Sun Yi? There seemed to be waves in Jun Jiuqing's eyes. He smiled. How could that be? Digression. It was snowing heavily and my hands were frozen stiff. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1953. There are 13 people in the 13U Guard. Sun Yi is ranked first because he is the strongest. Although the rest are also rather outstanding, they are still slightly inferior to Sun Yi. Jun Jiuqing said slowly. Yi Wentao thought to himself and felt that this was quite reasonable. However, since these people had been following Chu Luiyue since they were outside the Divine Ruins world, Sun Yi must be rather capable to have reached his current cultivation level. Either he had been a god in the past, or he had broken through after following Chu Luiyue to the Divine Ruins world. But no matter how one thought about it, these two guesses were somewhat unbelievable. How old was Sun Yi now? His strength was so valiant, how could it be achieved so quickly in a short period of time? By the way, Patriarch, I remember that there was a rumor that the third boss of Peach Blossom Dock City was also Xuanhuan's subordinate. Behind them, one of the elders who overheard their conversation suddenly thought of something and added on. That third boss came to Peach Blossom Cove a few years ago. He's doing business here and is doing very well. It was said that he had close dealings with the Black Sword sect here. But now, there was no need to think to know that the Black Sword sect had been destroyed. Not a single one of them had escaped. The people in the Divine Ruins world did not receive any news about this. The Black Sword sect seemed to have disappeared just like that, without a sound. If they had not been paying attention to the happenings in Peach Blossom Dock and knew that the Black Sword sect had always been here, they would have thought that Chu Luiyue had come here and taken over the place. That's right, that third boss is no ordinary person. The small space in Peach Blossom Dock's Qingshui cliff that contains many treasures belongs to him. The elder said. Otherwise, the Black Sword sect would not have kept him here for so long. Yi Wentao suddenly understood. So it's him? He remembered this person. It was just that when he had first heard the news, he had not paid much attention to it as he had placed more of his attention on the Black Sword sect. Later on, when he found out about the close relationship between the Black Sword sect and the Black Demon Cave, he gave up on the idea of making a move. Who would have thought that the next time he heard news about Peach Blossom Cove, Chu Luiyue had already become the master of this place. As for the Ink Sword sect, they had been completely wiped out. Yi Wentao looked ahead with a complicated expression. Could it be that Chu Luiyue was able to take down the Peach Blossom Dock so smoothly because of Third Boss and the others? If that was the case, then her subordinates really couldn't be underestimated. He paused and turned his head halfway. Do you know the origins of the 13U guards in Xuanhuan? Jun Jiuqing lowered his eyes and shook his head. These people have been following her since a long time ago, and she was the one who found them. As for their specific origins and background, other than her, there shouldn't be anyone else who knows. Yi Wentao was a little disappointed, but he was not surprised by the answer. He couldn't help but glance at Rongxiu. From the beginning to the end, Rongxiu had been by Chu Luiyue's side, but he had almost never made a move. His intention was clear. Peach Blossom Dock was Chu Luiyue's territory. Everything here should be settled by Chu Luiyue and her subordinates. To put it bluntly, he had purposely given Chu Luiyue a chance to establish her authority today. It seemed that he was determined to make Peach Blossom Dock belong to Chu Luiyue, head of family Yi. A nervous and hurried voice suddenly sounded. Yi Wentao turned around. The person who spoke was an elder of the Nan family, Nan Hetien. This person was also Nan Yifun's confidant. At this moment he looked very worried and anxious. He cupped his fists at Yi Wentao. Head of family Yi, for the sake of the long-standing relationship between our families, please lend a hand and save my family head. At this time, it was definitely impossible to rely on the Nan family's strength alone. Only with the help of family Yi would there be a glimmer of hope. Nan Hetien didn't want to ask so directly, but he was forced to do so. He really had no choice. He had followed Nan Yifan for several years and had always been loyal. Now that he saw Nan Yifan being tortured like this, how could he not feel sad? Moreover, he knew that Nan Yifan had secretly gone to family Yi. He knew very well that the two must have made some agreement. But for some reason, family Yi still hadn't made a move at this point. They even looked like they didn't care and were just watching from the sidelines. Nan Hetien was burning with anxiety. He had no choice but to ask for help directly. The people of the Nan family also looked over. Yi Wentao's gaze swept across these people's faces, and he sneered in his heart. In fact, among these people there might be some who couldn't open the barrier. If the 8 venerables joined forces there would be some hope. But they didn't do so. It seemed that the people inside the barrier weren't the only ones who wanted Nan Yifan dead. All these years the internal conflicts of the Nan family had always existed, but they were suppressed by Nan Yifan and didn't show much. However, when it came to the critical moment, it was fatal. Seeing that Yi Wentao didn't say anything, Nan Hetien gritted his teeth and continued. If family Yi is willing to help, the Nan family will do our best to help family Yi take down Peach Blossom Dock. As soon as this was said, the expressions of the people of the Nan family changed. Everyone could see that Nan Yifan was on the verge of death. Such a person was destined to be unable to continue to be the head of the family. Even if they managed to save him, what was the point? There were people who didn't like Nan Yifan, and Luo Yan's words earlier had shaken many people's hearts. Nan Hetien was Nan Yifan's closest confidant. He was naturally willing to do everything to save Nan Yifan, but others didn't think so. So after he said this, the people of the Nan family remained silent and didn't say anything. However, all of Nan Hetien's attention was on Yi Wentao at this time, so he didn't notice. Yi Wentao pondered for a moment, then glanced inside the barrier again. Nan Yifan knelt on the ground, his body was tightly bound and twisted. Blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth, but he couldn't say a word. From the looks of it, he was in an extremely sorry state. Who would have thought that Nan Yifan, the head of the Nan family, would be reduced to such a state one day? Yi Wentao frowned. Unfortunately, he had overestimated Nan Yifan. He had wasted so much time. It seemed that he had to do it himself. All right. In that case, I'll have to trouble everyone to do it together. Yi Wentao raised his hand. A gigantic bronze battle axe appeared in his hand. Some mysterious runes were engraved on the battle axe. When Yi Wentao mobilized the force in his body, a buzzing sound suddenly came from it. The next moment, he waved his arm and chopped down with the battle axe in his hand. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1954. Great Azure Sun Axe. Following Yi Wentao's shout, the sky quickly darkened. The wind howled. A huge black spatial crack appeared. The ground also began to crack and a ravine spread. Immediately after, the sharp power of the axe rapidly transformed into a dazzling azure light ball, like the sun. It approached the barrier of Peach Blossom Cove. The transparent barrier that was suffused with a faint dazzling light began to shake violently. Ripples spread out in all directions. Xin Yi quickly looked back and was about to move when he was stopped by Chu Luiyue. Xin Yi watched Nan Yifan first. He immediately retracted his leg that was about to step out and nodded in response. Yes. Then he walked in front of Nan Yifan and waved his sleeve. Nan Yifan's body suddenly flew backward. Xin Yi's figure moved and followed after him. Bang! Nan Yifan finally fell in front of Peach Blossom Cove's city gate. He was already at the end of his rope. Xin Yi's move caused his body to tremble and he completely fainted. Actually, to be precise, he fell inside the city gate. When the people in charge of guarding the city gate saw this, not only were they not shocked, their faces were filled with admiration and praise. They had clearly seen how strong Nan Yifan was just now. However, in the end he was still defeated by Xin Yi. From beginning to end, Xin Yi's body was not stained with a single trace of blood. 13 stood at the side very close to Nan Yifan. He carefully sized up Nan Yifan, mainly looking at his injuries. As he looked, he recalled Xinyi's moves. Soon, Xinyi also walked over. Big brother. 13's face was filled with faint excitement. He had not seen his big brother personally fight for a long time. Now that he saw it, he was indeed powerful. The guards at the side also hurriedly bowed. Greetings to Lord Xinyi. As people who had experienced the chaos of Peach Blossom Cove, they knew that Xinyi was also very powerful. However, they did not know that he was so powerful. As expected of Lord Yu's man, the world admired the strong. Xinyi's display of such powerful strength naturally made them even more convinced. Xinyi nodded slightly and walked over, throwing a jade bottle to 13. Feed the pill inside to him. Master said to keep him alive. 13 hurriedly took the item. Yes. Although he didn't know why Master wanted to spare Nan Yifan's life, he had to follow Master's orders. 13 walked over and forcefully pried open Nan Yifan's mouth, feeding him the pill. His youthful face was calm and composed, and his movements were clean and swift. The surrounding people watched with trepidation. Isn't 13 only in his teens? Why did he seem so familiar with this kind of thing? Moreover, although Nan Yifan had fainted, he was still a venerable god powerhouse who had terrorized a region. Most people would still be somewhat afraid. However, there was not the slightest bit of fear on 13's face. Such courage was hard to come by. To be able to follow Master Yu, I reckon. They are not ordinary people. Xinyi quickly retracted his gaze as a ripple flashed across his eyes. Master seems to. Are you finally going to make a move? The forces of both sides were fighting fiercely. At a certain moment, a crack finally appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiyue muttered. The Great Azure Sun Axe is one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. It is indeed extraordinary. Rong Xiu's heart stirred as he glanced at her. As expected, he saw a familiar expression in her eyes. He could not help but curl his lips and ask in a low voice. Do you want it? Digression, I'm crippled. My hands are completely frozen. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1955. Chu Luiyue chuckled. Of course she wanted such a precious treasure. They had openly come to snatch her peach blossom dock. Why couldn't she think about their divine weapon? However, no one knew who would win in the end. Just let me know if you need my help. Rong Xiu was not interested in these things. However, since she liked it, he would snatch it from her. Chu Luiyue smiled and shook her head. No need. If she wanted it, she could get it herself. This was a dangerous situation, but it was also a rare opportunity. As long as she could solve today's problem, she would be able to enjoy some peace and quiet for a long time. After she finished speaking, she quickly circulated the force in her body. A turbulent and vast force gushed out from the gorgeous water droplet in her dantian. Almost at the same time, the force of the peach blossom dock's barrier increased again. In the blink of an eye, the crack that had just been split open was restored to its original state. The dazzling green sun was once again blocked outside. The forces of both sides clashed fiercely with each other. The surrounding void was constantly collapsing. However, the barrier was still very stable under the intense impact of the energy. The Yi family watched from the back with a complicated expression. It seems that the peach blossom dock has undergone a great change. I remember that when I came here in the past, the barrier was not stable and we could enter and exit at will. Moreover, the slightest movement could cause the void to collapse. Who would have thought that it would turn out like this? I didn't expect that even the family head could not break the barrier. How did Xuanhuan do it? This is really strange. Are we going to be trapped outside like this for the rest of our lives? That would be too shameful. When the Nan family had tried to break the barrier several times and failed, most of the family Yi members did not think much of it. It wasn't until now that Yi Wentao's attack was met with an extremely strong obstruction that they completely understood. This barrier was much stronger than they had expected. Yi Wentao was able to hold such a high position in the family Yi because he was strong enough. If even he could not break the barrier, if that was the case, they would probably be in trouble as well. Moreover, from now on, the entire family Yi would be utterly humiliated. He no longer had the face to stand in the divine ruins world. Yi Wenzhua scolded coldly. What are you talking about? No matter how powerful that Xuanhuan Yu is, it can't fly. She might be able to hold on for a while, but that didn't mean that she could protect Peach Blossom Dock. I want to see how long she can be arrogant for. As soon as he finished speaking, a deep and powerful voice came from the distant horizon. You're my disciple. Of course you can be arrogant as long as you want. His voice was like a sudden clap of thunder, crushing through the thick layers of clouds and rolling over. Xuanhuan's heart sank and he immediately turned back to look. At the same time, many people were alarmed by the commotion, and they raised their heads to look over. An old man dressed in a long gray robe was coming from the place where heaven and earth met. His speed was extremely fast. In just a few flashes he appeared in front of everyone. It was none other than the dean of Lingxiao College, Nan Suhuai. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. He came as expected. Nan Suhuai was Chu Liyue's master, and he had always doted on her. As long as he knew about the situation here, he would definitely rush over. But how did he get here so quickly? One had to know that the Nan family and Family E had come quietly this time, and they only showed up when they arrived at Peach Blossom Dock. Their whereabouts were concealed along the way, and it was reasonable to say that there was no way for them to be exposed. Even if Chu Liyue had sent out a distress signal after knowing that they were here, this place was thousands of miles away from Lingxiao College. Nan Suhuai shouldn't have arrived at this time, right? Nan Suhuai hovered in the air and quickly scanned the surroundings. His gaze lingered on Xuanhua and Jun Jiuqing for a moment, and he snorted. I was wondering why I didn't see you all during this period. I thought you all went out to train and cultivate, but who knew that you would bully the students of your own college? Xuanhua, you're really competent as the vice dean. Xuanhua's heart trembled when he was stared at by Nan Suhuai. However, he quickly suppressed these emotions. Nan Suhuai was powerful, but now Family E had the advantage in numbers. Was it possible for him to be afraid of him? In the past, due to various considerations, he had been tolerating it. But now that they had fallen out, there was no need for him to pretend anymore. Xuanhua sneered. Nan Suhuai, do you really think I care about being the vice dean? Your position as dean should have been mine all those years ago. You've occupied it for so many years and now you want to lecture me from above. Are you worthy? Nan Suhuai's face turned cold. I know you're still holding a grudge over what happened back then, but this is Master's decision. Besides, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. If you're dissatisfied with me, just say it. Why do you have to shift all this onto you? Have you thought about the consequences of attacking the students of your own college? Consequences? Xuanhua seemed to have heard a joke. Isn't it just the vice dean of Lingxiao College? Today I'm telling you that I'm not going to be the vice dean anymore. From now on, Xuanhua have nothing to do with Lingxiao College anymore. He had Family E behind him. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to prove that he wasn't worse than his elder brother, he wouldn't have gone to Lingxiao College. But now, it was meaningless to care about that. Nan Suhuai looked down at him and said word by word. Xuanhua, this time you're not resigning from your position as the vice dean. Instead, you're expelled from Lingxiao College. Xuanhua's face turned pale. At this moment, several figures rushed over from behind. It's so lively here. Are we late? Everyone looked over. It was Xuanhuan Jing. There were actually several venerable god powerhouses following behind him. Everyone was stunned. There were at least 20 supreme gods. Where did Xuanhuan Jing find so many helpers? Under everyone's shocked gaze, Xuanhuan Jing stroked his beard and said with a smile, I've brought some guests with me. I brought some friends over as guests. Do you not welcome them? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1956. Everyone fell into a strange silence. He brought some guests over as guests, easy for him to say. How could he bring so many supreme gods with him? How could they be guests? They were obviously here for a fight. Chu Liyue was also stunned for a moment. Then, the corners of her lips curled up as she smiled. How could it be? You came at the right time. As she spoke, her gaze quickly swept past the people behind Xuanhuan Jing. She realized that most of them were unfamiliar faces. Judging from their auras, they should not be weak. However, at this moment, they were all standing behind Xuanhuan Jing and looked amiable. Moreover, Chu Liyue acutely sensed that they seemed to be rather respectful to Xuanhuan Jing. Chu Liyue's mind raced. She had roughly guessed the identity of these people. She immediately smiled and bowed politely. Junior Xuanhuan, you greets all the seniors. Brother Xuanhuan, I heard that this junior of yours is very powerful. I didn't believe it. Now that I've seen it, it's really not ordinary. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s chuckled and said, For thousands of years, countless aristocratic families have tried to seize the Peach Blossom Dock. Without exception, all of them returned in defeat. Today it was easily taken down by a junior like you. TSK, the young people nowadays really can't be underestimated. As soon as he spoke, he immediately received the agreement of many people beside him. That's right. The things that happened before were spread like wildfire in the world of divine ruins. I thought that it was you who secretly helped and wanted to create momentum for it. Who knew? It turns out that we underestimated you. Sigh, it's a pity that our group of disappointing people can't even compare to half of him. I'm so angry. I really can't be envious. Brother Xuanhuan, what kind of luck do you have? The middle-aged man who spoke at the beginning chuckled. Look at what you're saying. Brother Xuanhuan is a hero. Naturally, his juniors are also extraordinary. Otherwise, how could the holy son of the Yuntian Tower fall in love with him so much? Xuanhuan Jing raised his eyebrows with a proud expression. Of course, the sons and daughters of the Xuanhuan family are the best. Hearing these words, Chu Liyue's ears slightly heated up. Everyone liked to hear nice words. However, with so many elders gathered together and teased her in front of so many people, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke with a smile. Senior Zhao Song is right. Being able to marry you is indeed Rong Xiu's good fortune. Many people were shocked when they heard this name. Zhao Song? This name could be said to be famous in the Divine Ruins world. It was rumored that this person came from a humble background and had no relatives since he was young. He had wandered the world alone. It wasn't until the age of 12 that he was inadvertently discovered to have an outstanding talent for cultivation, and thus began to cultivate. It had to be known that many children in the Divine Ruins world started cultivating at the age of 3 or 4. He had only started at the age of 12, so he was truly late by quite a bit. However, he had the Tianjing Yuan meridian. Furthermore, his comprehension was extremely high. In just 8 short years he had successfully become a high deity. At that time he was only 20 years old. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world, such a genius was in existence that was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. From then on, Zhao Song's reputation soared. However, from then on, it was as if he had disappeared and never appeared in front of everyone again. In the beginning, many people guessed that he might have been in seclusion to cultivate, or that he might have been delayed by other matters. However, after a long time he still did not appear. Gradually, there were rumors that he had met with an accident and had died. Later on, everyone gradually forgot this name and did not mention it anymore. And these things had happened 1,000 years ago. Today, 1,000 years later, who would have thought that Zhao Song would suddenly appear here? Moreover, it seemed that his relationship with Xuanhuan Jing was extremely good. Generally speaking, people and things that happened 1,000 years ago would not have a deep impression of people and things that happened 1,000 years ago. The reason why the Nan family and Family E reacted so quickly was, on one hand, because they had always thought highly of themselves and were very concerned about such outstanding geniuses. On the other hand, many of them were actually quite old, so they had a clear impression of these matters. When Rong Xiu mentioned it, they quickly recalled. It seemed that Zhao Song had long been familiar with Xuanhuan Jing. Otherwise he would not have come to support him. Yi Wenzhua frowned and asked in a low voice, Zhao Song, do you really want to go against Family E for the Xuanhuan family? Zhao Song laughed heartily and heroically. I'm already here. Why do you still ask such an obvious question? Yi Wenzhua's face darkened when he was ridiculed. However, at this time he could not go against the other party directly, so he could only endure for the time being. The other party had brought a lot of gods with them. In addition to Nan Suhuai and Xuanhuan Jing, the number of gods they had was almost more than the two families combined. Moreover, there might be other experts hiding in Peach Blossom Dock City. Because of the arrival of this group of people, the situation on the scene had changed greatly. If they faced the other party directly, they might be the ones at a disadvantage. At this time Yi Wentao also turned around. Compared to the other people present, his expression and reaction were much calmer. Zhao Song, I don't know how Xuanhuan Jing persuaded you to come. However, if you are willing to leave now, Family E can give you a higher price. In fact, Yi Wentao knew many of these people. Most of them were rogue cultivators. Not many of them were backed by top aristocratic families and clans, and most of them had not come out in recent years. It was difficult for Xuanhuan Jing to invite them one by one. The reason why Xuanhuan Jing could invite so many people was because of his identity as a venerable craftsman. However, Family E did not lack such experts. As for all kinds of treasures and magic weapons, Family E had a rich foundation which was not something that Xuanhuan Jing could compare with. Therefore Yi Wentao was so rich and overbearing. At this point he would not let anyone or anything be an obstacle to him. After hearing Yi Wentao's words, Zhao Song showed some interest and seemed to be a little interested. Really? I, Yi Wentao, always keep my words, Yi Wentao said calmly. Zhao Song looked back at the crowd and then at Shangguan Jing, seeming to be a little hesitant. Then he nodded. Okay, if you can meet my conditions, I'll agree to leave. I'll also take the people behind me with me. Yi Wentao smiled. Shangguan Jing was powerful, but after all he was fighting alone. How could he compete with the entire family Yi? These people had come for nothing. As long as family Yi agrees to give each of us 5 venerable magic weapons, we will leave immediately. As Zhao Song spoke, he stretched out his hand and made a 5 sign. The smile on Yi Wentao's face froze. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1957. Zhao Song. Don't go too far. Yi Wenzhua couldn't help but curse. Zhao Song looked innocent. Hey, didn't your family head ask me to raise the conditions? If I did, why are you still scolding me? Yi Wenzhua gritted his teeth. Big brother said that he could raise the conditions, but he didn't ask you to ask for too much. They were simply taking advantage of the situation. Zhao Song and the others didn't plan to negotiate with them at all. They were deliberately humiliating them. Zhao Song spread his hands. So it's because you think that my price is too high. If you don't have the money, don't take on the porcelain job. I thought the Yi family was wealthy and generous, that's why I said it. Who knew that you weren't sincere at all? His words were filled with disappointment. Family Yi was furious. It was clearly Zhao Song who was too much, but in the end he said that family Yi was stingy? What a bogus accusation. No matter how powerful Shangguan Jing was, it was impossible for him to have dozens of venerable artifacts, right? He might not even be able to get 1 for each of them. However, Zhao Song asked for 5 for each of them. Not to mention that family Yi might not have them, even if they did, they would go bankrupt if they took out so many. Nan Su Huai stroked his beard and didn't mind watching the fun. He laughed and said, Senior Zhao Song, if you add in the Nan family, maybe they can take it out too? The faces of the Nan family members instantly darkened. What did it have to do with them? Those words were said by Yi Wentao himself. They had already suffered heavy losses. What else did he want them to do? Zhao Song hissed and shook his head regretfully. The Nan family? They can't even protect their own family head. What can they do? Nan Heqian was furious and wanted to rush forward. Zhao Song glanced at him. What do you mean? Do you want to fight? As soon as he finished speaking, the auras of the gods beside him soared at the same time. It seemed that they really wanted to fight at any time. Shangguan Jing pressed his hand and chuckled. Hey, don't be so angry. Today I invited everyone here as guests, so let's get along well. Has just taken down the Peach Blossom Cove, and I reckon that she has just tidied it up recently. If there's another battle, how can it be good if our Yuer's territory is dirted? Yi Wentao's face finally turned ashen. It was Shangguan Jing who brought him here. It was obvious that he wanted to fight them to the end. Now he actually had the nerve to say such words? Dirtying Chu Liuyue's territory? Who was she scolding? Yi Wentao's self-control was excellent. No matter what happened, no matter what his mood was, he could basically maintain a calm appearance and not let anyone see any clues. However, at this moment, because of Shangguan Jing's words, the plan was broken. In fact, it wasn't because of how sarcastic Shangguan Jing's words were, but because Yi Wentao knew that the current situation was indeed very unfavorable to them. He was able to maintain his composure earlier because he was very confident that he could win today's battle. But now, it was obvious that the family Yi was on the losing end of the fight. As for the Nan family, in fact, he didn't take them seriously from the beginning to the end. Those people looked friendly on the surface, but in fact they were all in their own camps. If it wasn't for the fact that Nan Yifan was still alive and being threatened by Chu Luiyue and the others as a hostage, many of the Nan family members would have completely fallen out with them. If they really fought, those people from the Nan family probably wouldn't be of much use. Therefore Yi Wentao became anxious in his heart. Bang! At this moment, a loud sound was heard. Everyone looked over, only to see that the cyan sun-like ball of light that Yi Wentao had just unleashed had exploded with a loud bang. The Peach Blossom Dock's boundary began to shake violently. But it still didn't break. Chu Luiyue still managed to block Yi Wentao's move. Everyone's feelings were very complicated. If even Yi Wentao couldn't do it, then who else had the ability to do it? The Nan family members came to take revenge, but now they could only watch as their family head was trapped and tortured inside, and they couldn't do anything to help. Family Yi came to snatch Peach Blossom Dock, but they couldn't even break the boundary at the outermost boundary. How could they take revenge? How could they fight for it? What a joke. In addition, Xuanhuan Jing and the others had rushed over and were eyeing them covetously. Yi Wentao and the others were now in a dilemma. Chu Liyue's mind moved, and the boundary flashed with light and began to devour the residual energy that was violently overflowing. After the Peach Blossom Doc's boundary was strengthened by the power of the God Annihilation Tribulation, it became extremely tough. Under Chu Liyue's control, it could convert most of the energy into its own, and use it to repair and improve. Unknowingly, it saved Chu Liyue a lot of trouble. In a short while, most of the surrounding energy had been devoured. The surroundings gradually calmed down. However, the people present couldn't calm down at this moment. This sister was simply an iron bastion. Even without the help of outsiders, Chu Liyue could rely on this boundary to block most of the attacks. Yi Wentao looked at the sparkling boundary and gradually tightened his grip on the great green sun axe in his hand. It seemed that the previous plan wouldn't work. Right now, he could only think of another way. After pausing for a moment, he suddenly said, Xuanhuan Jing is right. If so many people attack at the same time, it will indeed cause a great impact on Peach Blossom Dock. Why don't we each pick one person to fight? Chapter 1958. An undisguised sneer was suddenly heard. Nan Suhuai looked at Yi Wentao with a half-smile. Master Family Yi, you've got a good plan. Just now, when this old man came, you ignored me and said that you would break this barrier no matter what. Why did you suddenly change your mind when Senior Xuanhuan and the others arrived? Everyone could see that the situation had changed. Even if Yi Wentao joined forces with the Nan family, it would be difficult for them to gain an advantage. The gods that Xuanhuan Jing had invited were not just for show. If a fight really broke out, it would be obvious who would win and who would lose. After this battle, the Nan family and Family Yi would suffer heavy losses. Yi Wentao did not want to take such a risk, so he changed his mind and suggested something else. Yi Wentao was infuriated by Nan Suhuai's public mockery and disdain, but he quickly suppressed his anger. That was not the most important thing right now. Only by breaking the stalemate could they turn the situation around. This was the only way he could take down Peach Blossom Dock. He took a deep breath and looked straight at Chu Liyue. Xuanhuan Yu, do you agree? He did not care what others thought because it did not matter. Since everyone believed that Chu Liyue was the master of Peach Blossom Dock, she was the only one who needed to be questioned. It was up to her whether she agreed or not. Countless pairs of eyes fell on Chu Liyue. Then they saw Chu Liyue's red lips curl slightly. Her eyes glimmered as she nodded gently. All right. All right. Did she agree? Almost everyone was stunned. Even the people from the Peach Blossom Dock were shocked. She should have rejected this suggestion. Why did she agree? They clearly had the upper hand in the current situation. There was no need for them to compromise with Yi Wentao. Why, how would Master agree? 13 muttered in a daze. As he asked, he could not help but look at Cini. He saw that Cini looked calm as if he was not surprised. Big brother? 13 could not help but ask. What do you think Master is thinking? Cini's expression was indifferent. He paused for a moment before explaining. It's nothing. Master really doesn't want to dirty the new territory that has just been cleaned up. 13 was speechless. If you can solve the problem in the most convenient way, why waste your energy? Cini continued. 13 nodded thoughtfully. He roughly understood what his elder brother meant. Although they had more paragons on their side, they had a higher chance of winning. But if so many people were to really fight, it would be earth-shattering. Even if they won in the end, they would have to pay a heavy price. If he could defeat Yi Wentao in a one-on-one duel, it would save him a lot of time and effort. But the key point was that Yi Wentao's strength is tyrannical, and it is very likely that he will personally fight. Who will Master choose to have the certainty of victory? Yi Wentao took a step forward and looked at Chu Liyue with a smile, but the corners of his eyes were still cold. How brave. Originally, he was still a little hesitant, thinking that Chu Liyue would very likely not agree. After all, this was too risky. But fortunately, she made this choice in the end. Since I am the one who initiated this, the person who will fight should naturally be me. Yi Wentao's words were followed by silence. They had already expected this. Then they heard Yi Wentao continue. Similarly, Xuanhuan Yu, everyone is fighting over Peach Blossom Dock, so the person you choose should be your own person, and no outsiders should interfere. You don't have any objections to this, right? Everyone was stunned. Yi Wentao's subtext was that Chu Liyue could not ask Zhao Song and the others for help, and could only choose one of her closest and most trusted people to fight. That narrowed her options by a lot. Yi Wentao's words were clearly to further suppress Chu Luiyue. This statement wasn't wrong, but it was somewhat opportunistic. Moreover, it was said by someone of Yi Wentao's status and strength, which was even more degrading and despicable. Zhao Song clicked his tongue and could not help but say, "Brother Xuanhuan, we have been away from worldly affairs for a long time, so we don't know that the people out there are so shameless." Shengguan Jing was also suppressing the anger in his heart, and he sneered. "You are so righteous when it comes to seizing other people's territory. What else can't you do?" Many of the family Yi's people looked terrible and their faces turned pale. They had always been high and noble, and even the first-class families were very polite and respectful when they saw them. When had they ever been humiliated like this? The point was, they could not refute it. However, compared to these people who were fidgeting, Yi Wentao's face was calm, and there was not the slightest ripple. It was as if he could not hear these words at all. He just stared at Chu Luiyue, waiting for her answer. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. He was indeed worthy of being the head of the family Yi for so many years. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary person could have. She nodded. What the head of the family Yi said is not without reason. Everyone was even quieter. Some of the family Yi and the Nan family were secretly relieved. On the other hand, many of the people in Peach Blossom Dock were worried. This was a bad choice. Even if Chu Luiyue did not agree, Yi Wentao could not say anything. But why did she agree? Yi Wentao narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, have you chosen the person? Chu Luiyue raised the corner of her mouth and took a step forward. I've chosen. Peach Blossom Dock Shengguanyu, fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1959. Shengguanyu of Peach Blossom Dock, fight. Her clear voice spread far and wide, landing clearly in everyone's ears. After a brief moment of silence, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths could be heard incessantly. Is Chu Luiyue out of her mind? She's going to fight Yi Wentao in person? Isn't she courting death? Even though she was indeed more powerful than many exalted gods of the same level, she was still an exalted god. Yi Wentao was one of the best among the exalted gods. She had almost no chance of winning in a fight between the two of them. Yi Wentao was also stunned. For once he was slow to react. Are you sure? He scanned Chu Luiyue's body suspiciously. With her? Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows and chuckled. I don't regret my words. Why, family Yi, don't you think it's a good idea? Why would it be a bad idea? This is great. Yi Wentao had thought of this possibility, but he did not have much hope. He could tell that Chu Luiyue valued Peach Blossom Dock very much. If she had any sense left, she would not have chosen to fight in person. Besides Zhao Song and the others, she had other choices. Isn't Sun Yi an excellent choice? But in the end she chose to fight in person? Yi Wentao was shocked, but he could not help but have some doubts. Chu Luiyue is so bold. Does she have some other trump card? At that thought he could not help but look at Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's expression was calm and nothing could be seen on his face. There seemed to be a faint smile on his lips. It seemed like he approved of Chu Luiyue's choice. However, there was more to it than that. Yi Wentao's mind raced. In the end he suppressed this thought. Even if Chu Luiyue had some tricks up her sleeve, they would be useless in the face of absolute power. As long as he defeated her quickly, this matter would be settled. There was no time to lose. Yi Wentao laughed. You have guts. I admire you. Next, please enlighten me, Your Highness. As he spoke, he paused for a moment and looked around him. Where would you like to start, Your Highness? He was asking about the area outside the barrier. Chu Luiyue laughed. My Peach Blossom Cove has just been tidied up with much difficulty, but it can't withstand any more torment. Still outside. After saying that, her figure moved and she actually flashed out of the enchantment. Everyone's eyes on her. Shock, curiosity, worry, confusion, Chu Luiyue's eyes. In the blink of an eye, she was thought. She's Anyu uses garden. Chu Luiyue smiled and didn't mind as she said loudly, There seemed to be a hint of a smile in her voice. Apart from Yi Wentao, the Nan family and family Yis were the people closest to her. Hearing Chu Luiyue's, they almost subconsciously stepped back. But when they started to move, they suddenly realized that they had unconsciously followed Chu Luiyue's instructions. She wasn't anyone to them. Why should they listen to her? For a moment, many people were embarrassed. But they've already retreated halfway, a little further. Chu Luiyue said. This stays. I'm fighting, with family Yis. Swords have no eyes. It won't be good if I hurt you. Hers made everyone speechless. They had no choice but to step back again. In the end, with Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao as the center, there was a large empty space in the middle. Behind Chu Luiyue stood Xuanhuan, Zhao Song and the others. Behind Yi Wentao, family Yi and the Nan family stood together, but there was still a distance between them. Is it okay now? Yi Wentao asked faintly. Chu Luiyue nodded. At this moment she was holding a shield in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. She already looked quite imposing. Yi Wentao's gaze swept across the armillary shield without batting an eyelid. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Previously she had felt that something was wrong with Yi Wentao, as if he was trying his best to force her to make a move. Now it seemed that he was here for the armillary shield. Please? Yi Wentao replied. After saying that, he slightly staggered his feet, and the aura on his body suddenly soared. At this point Rong Xiu's figure moved and he flew out of the barrier. However, he didn't go forward. Instead he went to stand beside Xuanhuan Jing and the others. He greeted Xuanhuan Jing, Nan Su Huai and the others in turn. Zhao Song couldn't help but say, "It's been a long time since we last met. You're even more brilliant than before. The princess consort is indeed extraordinary. It's just that, are you really not worried?" Rong Xiu chuckled and said calmly, "Peach Blossom Cove is Yuer's territory. Naturally she can do whatever she wants. Since she made this choice she must have her reasons. All he needed to do was to respect and support her decision." Zhao Song and the others looked at each other in surprise. They had long heard that Rong Xiu doted on this princess consort, but they didn't expect it to be to this extent. On one hand he said that out of love and respect for Chu Luiyue. On the other hand he probably had enough confidence in her. However, a high god against a high god, no matter how they thought about it, they wouldn't win. At first they thought that Chu Luiyue would talk about some conditions, but she didn't. She just started like that. If she loses, with Rong Xiu, Xuanhuan Jing and the others around, Yi Wentao definitely can't take her life. However, they definitely can't take action unless it's a crucial moment. Then won't Chu Luiyue still lose the entire Peach Blossom Cove? Rong Xiu knew what they were thinking, but he didn't explain. He placed his hands behind his back and looked forward. After all, Yi Wentao was a high god. At this moment he was prepared to go all out, and his aura became even stronger. Behind him, quite a few people whispered softly. "I really don't know why Xuanhuan Yu is so stubborn. She actually agreed to this and even accepted the challenge herself. Isn't it obvious who will win or lose? She's young and it's inevitable that she's young and hot-blooded. She doesn't know who she is once she has some ability and fame. She'll cry in due time. How long do you think Master will take to take her down? 3 moves? It can't be that she won't admit defeat when she loses, right? How can that be? She's in front of so many people. Even if she can't bear to, she has to accept her loss. I think she'll regret it soon. It's a pity that there's no medicine for regret in this world." The group of people laughed softly. It was obvious that to them Yi Wentao would win for sure. The only problem was how long he would take to end this battle. Chu Luiyue looked calm as if she didn't care. Bang! A reddish gold fire suddenly surged out of Chu Luiyue's body. Digression, 6:30 p.m. While mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI Network. Chapter 1960. The loud and clear cry of a phoenix spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Immediately after, a small figure walked out of the flames. It was a little girl who looked no more than 3 or 4 years old. She was wearing a reddish gold lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. She was barefooted and looked very cute. Especially that pair of big black grape-like eyes, which were blinking and looked very lively and cute. When she walked, the golden bell on her head would let out a crisp sound. Many people looked over. When they saw the little girl's appearance, they were first stunned and then suddenly came back to their senses. Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? This is her contracted divine beast. No. This Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix is so young. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be able to transform into a human form. Didn't they say that this is the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? There should be something different, right? Although the news of Chu Luiyue contracting dumpling had already spread throughout the entire Divine Ruins world, the number of people who had actually seen dumpling could be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, when dumpling appeared at this time, it immediately caused everyone to be shocked. Dumpling was already used to this kind of situation. She stood in front of Chu Luiyue with one hand on her waist and the other pointing at Yi Wentao. She frowned and asked angrily, You old thing, you want to harm our Ayu? She was still young, so even if she spoke there was still a strong childish tone. To the crowd, not only did it not have any deterrence, but it also sounded a little funny. Some people couldn't help but laugh out loud. The crimson gold sky phoenix was an ancient divine beast, and the person in front of them was the young master of the crimson gold sky phoenix clan. Her status was even more noble. But she was too young. What kind of combat power could such a small thing have? Against ordinary cultivators she might be a little deterrent, but against someone of Yi Wentao's level, it was really useless. Yi Wentao stared at Dumpling and his brows moved slightly. She could transform into a human form at such a young age. No wonder she was chosen as the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan before she broke the contract with Chu Luiyue. Her talent bloodline should be extremely strong. Unlike the others, Yi Wentao had always been cautious. Therefore, when he saw Dumpling, he didn't disregard her like the others. We only agreed to fight to decide the ownership of Peach Blossom Dock, Yi Wentao said lightly. Putting everything else aside, the other party's identity was not to be trifled with. He didn't want to summon Yi Zhao's group over. How long has it been? Someone actually came over to snatch it openly? You still have the nerve to say it? You're already so old, how shameless. Yi Wentao frowned. Even if he didn't care about these things, it was really embarrassing to be insulted by a little girl in front of so many people. It would be strange if he didn't get angry. Cut the crap, let's see who's the real deal. He looked at Chu Luiyue and his voice turned cold. There was no point in pestering endlessly like this. End the battle quickly and take down Peach Blossom Dock. All the problems would be solved easily. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Family Yi, why are you in such a hurry? I'm not ready yet. Yi Wentao frowned. Ready? Wasn't it just a fight? What else was there to prepare? She already had the weapon in her hand and summoned the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix. What else did she want to do? Just as Yi Wentao was getting impatient, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Ziqin, I'll have to trouble you this time. There's more? Yi Wentao couldn't help but say. Xuanhuan, this is a one-on-one fight. You can't ask for outside help? Suddenly his voice stopped abruptly. The scene before him caused his eyes to be filled with astonishment. A tall and straight figure silently appeared beside Chu Luiyue. It was a young man in his 20s. He was very tall and wore a long black robe. His facial features were handsome and his expression was cold. He just stood there quietly and cold air continued to spread out from his body to the surroundings. His aura was very strong and oppressive. It was obvious that he was not weak. However, the most important thing was that there was a purple gold mark between his eyebrows. At first glance it looked like an eye. Yi Wentao's breathing suddenly stopped. That was an eye. Yi Wentao had dealt with the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle clan before. Therefore, when he first saw Ziqin, he keenly sensed that the aura on his body was very familiar. It was indeed the aura of the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. Could it be, this young man was not a human but a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle? Yi Wentao rejected the idea as soon as it appeared in his mind. How could it be? Although the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle was a high-level divine beast, only the two primordial divine beast clans could transform into human form. For so many years, there had never been a legendary Three-Eyed Eagle that could transform into human form in the world of divine ruins. For a moment, Yi Wentao almost thought that this was just an illusion, that the other party had used some sort of camouflage technique. However, he soon realized that was not the case. This was indeed the physical body of a human. Yi Wentao's heart was filled with shock. How could the others present not be the same? The crowd, which was still a little noisy, fell silent instantly. Chu Luiyue said with a smile, Yi Wentao is right. Patriarchy is right. Since the two of us have agreed to a one-on-one duel, of course we can't ask for outside help. However, Ziqin is not included in this list. Because he is also my contracted divine beast. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1961. The fact that Chu Luiyue had two contracted divine beasts was not a secret in the Yuntian Tower. Many people had witnessed Rong Xiu summoning two divine beasts at the same time when he was choosing his concubine. One of them was the red-tailed phoenix and the other was the legendary Three-Eyed Eagle. Those who were observant would know if they asked around. Before Yi Wentao came, he had specially investigated Chu Luiyue. When he saw Ziqin, he was stunned for a moment before he immediately understood. There was no need to ask. This little girl had broken through from that red-tailed phoenix. And the black-clothed young man next to her was definitely the legendary three-eyed eagle. He had actually transformed into a human form. This kind of thing was simply unheard of. It was not that Yi Wentao did not consider the fact that Chu Luiyue had contracted divine beasts to help her. However, even with the help of divine beasts, Chu Luiyue's strength would not be too strong due to the limitations of her own realm. At the very least, she could not be compared to him. The moment Chu Luiyue agreed to fight alone, Yi Wentao had already thought that he would win. Who knew that Chu Luiyue's two contracted divine beasts had actually transformed into human forms? The amount of information contained in this was too much. To be able to do this, on one hand, it proved that these two divine beasts were extremely talented and powerful. On the other hand, Yi Wentao was almost certain that they had definitely encountered some amazing opportunity. Perhaps Chu Luiyue still has some shocking trump card in her hands. Who knows? Zichen's appearance also caused the expressions of the surrounding people to change a few times. Everyone present had tyrannical strength. Even in the entire Divine Ruins world they were absolutely famous. However, even though they had seen countless things in the world, they were still stunned at this moment. It can't be right? This is the legendary three-eyed eagle that Xuanhuan you contracted? It transformed into a human form? Didn't they say that only the two ancient divine beasts could do this? What's going on now? I've read many ancient books, but I don't think there's anything like this. Wait, don't you think that Zichen's aura is a little strange? Other than the aura of the legendary three-eyed eagle, it seems, there's also a faint pressure? I feel it too, but I just can't remember. Just as everyone was discussing, Jun Jiuqing suddenly thought of something. He tilted his head slightly and looked at Miao Fushan. In an instant, something seemed to flash in his mind. It's the great phoenix dragon. He blurted out. As soon as these words were spoken, the group of people around them heard them clearly. The expressions of Yi Wenzhua and the others changed. The great phoenix dragon? How could? Someone subconsciously wanted to refute, but before he could finish his sentence he stopped abruptly. This was because Zichen's aura was very similar to Miao Fushan's. It was as if there was a string strung those pieces together. A hint of understanding flashed in Jun Jiuqing's eyes. Could this be the reason why Mao Zhen went to the Yintian Tower? When Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue got married, Mao Zhen, as the clan leader, personally went to congratulate them. Everyone was shocked and confused. They didn't know when the two of them had become friends with the great phoenix dragon. Jun Jiuqing had always been puzzled by this. Now that he saw Zichen, he finally understood. Zichen definitely had the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon in his body. Sure enough, as soon as this thought flashed in his mind, Miao Fushan flew out of the barrier and came to Rong Xiu's side. He looked at Zichen, stroked his beard and said with a smile. Zichen, I haven't seen you for a while. Your strength has increased again. Zichen bowed respectfully. It's all thanks to Senior Mao Zhen. These two simple sentences caused the surrounding atmosphere to freeze for a moment. What did he mean? Not only was Zichen related to the great phoenix dragon, but he was also related to Mao Zhen. Then, Mao Zhe was the clan leader of the great phoenix dragon. If that was the case, didn't that mean they couldn't afford to offend Zichen? Family Yi is a god while I'm just a high god. There's a huge difference in our strength. If I don't make more preparations and go all out, I don't think I have a chance of winning. Chu Luiyue raised an eyebrow and said. Yi Wentao's face turned pale. Miao Fushan's words just now were clearly expressing his attitude. He wanted to support Zichen. It's no wonder Chu Luiyue and the rest somehow got involved with the great phoenix dragon clan. No wonder Miao Fushan would rather break the contract and stand on Chu Luiyue's side. Now, Miao Fushan's attitude represented Mao Zhen's and the entire great phoenix dragon's attitude. He suppressed the anger in his heart and stared at the three figures in front of him. Chu Luiyue stood in the middle, while Dumpling and Zichen stood on either side. On the surface, the aura and pressure of these three people were much inferior to the others. However, in reality, the forces behind them caused Yi Wentao to have no choice but to be extremely cautious. On one side was the crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and on the other side was the great phoenix dragon. Yi Wentao had never thought that he would be besieged by two primordial divine beasts at the same time one day. Princess, you're really something. Yi Wentao sneered, his eyes cold. Ordinary people could only form a contract with one fiend beast, but Chu Luiyue had formed a contract with two fiend beasts at the same time. More importantly, one was a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was a godly three-eyed eagle that was inextricably linked to the great phoenix dragon clan. who didn't know that the relationship between these two primordial divine beasts was very subtle. Now they were serving the same master. Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen didn't seem to care about this matter. What ability did Chu Liwei rely on to do this? And the armillary sky shield in her hand, looking at the pair of dark and bright eyes that seemed to be smiling, Yi Wentao felt inexplicably uneasy. He faintly felt that he had underestimated Chu Liwei. Swoosh! Chu Liwei suddenly raised the crimson heaven sword in her hand. A short and sharp sound of something breaking through the air was heard. "Master family Yi, please?" As soon as she finished speaking, Chu Liwei jumped up with the tip of her foot. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to rapidly gather toward the crimson heaven sword. Yi Wentao's face darkened. This Chu Liwei is really gutsy. At this moment, not only was she not afraid, she even chose to take the initiative to attack. It seemed that she had a lot of confidence in herself. Relying on those two fiend beasts? Yi Wentao sneered in his heart. The appearance of Dumpling and Zichen had indeed made him a little more apprehensive. But that was all. One had to know that the strength of a contracted mythological beast was largely determined by the master of the contract. Chu Liwei was just a high deity now. Even if she tried her best, what could she do? Yi Wentao's chi sank into his dantian. Great Azure Sun Axe. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1962. Yi Wentao was a god after all. The moment he raised his hand, the aura on his body began to surge crazily. Soon the aura around him greatly suppressed Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei's speed began to decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Dumpling's bloodline was noble and was not affected by the aura at all. She turned her head to look at Zichen, rubbed her nose and looked up at him. "Let's compete today and see who can take care of him first." Zichen narrowed his eyes slightly. He was not interested in this kind of competition. However, when he saw Dumpling's enthusiasm, his lips moved slightly, and the words of rejection that were about to come out of his mouth suddenly stopped. Dumpling did not notice this and only took it as Zichen's agreement. Her body moved, and she transformed into a reddish-gold stream of light that went straight for Yi Wentao. "See if I don't beat you to death today." Dumpling shouted loudly and arrived in front of Yi Wentao in the blink of an eye. She punched out. Her palms were white and chubby, and she clenched them into small fists like a ball of soft white cotton. From afar she did not seem to be a threat at all. Yi Wentao did not take Dumpling's attack seriously at first. However, the closer he got, the more he was surprised to find that the power contained in Dumpling's fist was far beyond his imagination. He frowned and then directly swung the sun great axe. The green light quickly gathered. The sharp and scorching aura immediately caused the surrounding air to become boiling hot. The energy surged and it kept closing in on Dumpling. A totem flashed between Dumpling's eyebrows. A dazzling purplish gold glow instantly erupted from her body. Boom. The power of both sides collided fiercely just like that. The violent energy vibrations instantly left a huge crater in the ground. Immediately after, Dumpling's figure flew backward. The terrifying impact swept over, and her body fell uncontrollably toward the ground. Dumpling's chest felt stuffy. She glanced around and found that she was about to fall to the ground. She immediately widened her eyes. This won't do. If she were to fall in front of so many people, it would be too embarrassing. She gritted her teeth and was about to save herself when she suddenly felt a gentle force lift her up. This force slowed down her speed and after stabilizing her, it quickly retreated. Dumpling turned around in a daze, only to see a black figure flashing past. Just now, was Zichen the one who attacked? Dumpling was stunned for a moment and blinked her eyes. Weren't they competing? Zichen was actually helping her? Looking at the tall figure in front of her, Dumpling bit her finger thoughtfully. He should be doing this for Master's sake? That's right. Relatively speaking, it was more important to deal with that annoying old man first. As for the competition, it was all incidental. Of course, Ayu was the main person in charge. Dumpling thought seriously. But, if she accepted his help for no reason, wouldn't she be at a disadvantage? Dumpling clenched her fists, and her eyes burned with excitement and fighting spirit. With a tap of her toes, she quickly rushed forward again. Flanking from the other side. She couldn't lose. Dumpling was sent flying. On the other side, Yi Wentao's situation was not much better. Under the impact of that shocking and violent force, he took half a step back, and the soles of his feet sank deeply into the ground. In this way he finally managed to stabilize his body. Although he had the upper hand compared to Dumpling, Yi Wentao was not happy at all. He was a god. And Dumpling? She was just a young crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He originally thought that this attack would directly kill Dumpling, or at least make her lose her ability to fight. But the result was the complete opposite. After Zichen caught Dumpling, Yi Wentao hurriedly took a look and was shocked to find that Dumpling did not seem to be injured. Such powerful physical strength had surpassed many adult crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. How could this be? Yi Wentao could not figure it out. He was puzzled and angry. But he did not have much time to think about this, because soon, Zichen caught up. Like Dumpling, he chose to attack head-on. A cold aura spread out from Zichen's body. He suddenly raised his hand and a cold black mist spread out from his palm. Yi Wentao was about to move, but he was shocked to find that a layer of frost had formed on his sun great axe. And at this time the cold air was still accumulating, causing the layer of ice to become thicker and thicker. Affected by the cold air, Yi Wentao was shocked to find that his force was gradually unable to infuse into the sun great axe. He waved the sun great axe in disbelief and wanted to use the force in his body to resist the cold air, but he found that the effect was minimal. Yi Wentao almost sucked in a cold breath. What the hell? It was just a legendary three-eyed eagle. How could it suppress the sun great axe? This was one of the 10 great sacred artifacts. What Yi Wentao did not know was that Zichen's physical body was forged from the bones and blood of a real great phoenix dragon, so it was already extremely strong. In addition, he had the support of Mao Zhen's strength. His strength far exceeded that of an ordinary legendary three-eyed eagle. To a certain extent he had borrowed Mao Zhen's pressure, so naturally he could suppress Yi Wentao. What frightened Yi Wentao even more was that the cold air was still spreading toward him. At this moment, a bright silver light flashed over. Chu Luiyue slashed down with his sword. The sharp blade slashed straight at Yi Wentao's face. Digression: I actually strained my right shoulder when I slept yesterday. I woke up at 5 in the morning because of the pain and I got up to apply plasters. I cried because of my own stupidity. I'll come back at 6 o'clock. Oh. Mobile user, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1963. In a moment of desperation, Yi Wentao made a prompt decision and threw out the sun great azure axe in his hand. At the same time he quickly retreated. The sharp edge of the sword brushed past the tip of his nose, narrowly missing him. Even though Yi Wentao's physical strength was extremely strong, Chu Luiyue's sword still caused him to feel a piercing pain. Almost half of his face was shaved off. Bang! The sun great azure axe went straight for Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised her hand and raised her sword. Clang! An extremely crisp sound of collision was heard. Chu Luiyue's hand went numb. The sun great azure axe changed direction and flew out. At this moment Yi Wentao suddenly stopped. With a thought, the sun great azure axe returned to his hand. It was ice cold to the touch. Yi Wentao's heart sank. The sun great azure axe's power had been completely sealed. He wanted to forcefully break it, but the layer of ice that covered it contained an extremely strong pressure. He couldn't completely remove it in a short period of time. In other words, Zichen had just made a move and directly removed one of his divine weapons. Yi Wentao was puzzled. At the same time he was gnashing his teeth in hatred. He really didn't know how Zichen had frozen the sun great azure axe when he didn't seem to have done anything. This battle had just begun, but he had already suffered heavy losses. The situation would only get worse later on. Chu Luiyue calmly rotated her sore wrist. The sun great azure axe was one of the 10 great divine weapons after all. It also contained Yi Wentao's power. The collision just now was truly very powerful. Fortunately, her divine body had reached large success. Moreover, Zichen had already helped to freeze most of the power on it. Otherwise, she might not have been able to take this attack head-on. Family head Yi, I see that your sun great azure axe doesn't seem to be very useful in your hands. Why don't you show it to me? Chu Luiyue revealed a smile and said very sincerely. Yi Wentao was so angry that his forehead was throbbing. How could he not tell that Chu Luiyue was coveting his sun great azure axe? She hadn't even won yet and she was already so arrogant. He snorted coldly. If you want to see, then come over with your own ability. After saying that, he held his breath and waved his hand. Then a ball of dark green light like a river rushed out of his palm. Those rays of light quickly spread out, becoming stars that floated in the air. Space, of course. Family head is actually using God's domain? A cry came from the family's crowd. The E of Chu Yi's families of the world continents of the world of the world of the world of Izs Chu E Ys. Wen Tao. Wen Tao. As long as he made a move, it was very likely that he would be able to defeat her in 3 moves. Even when they saw Dumpling and Zichen appear, they still felt that Chu Luiyue was no match for Yi Wentao. With the help of Dumpling and Zichen, she could at most hold on for a little longer, but it still wouldn't affect the outcome. If 3 moves weren't enough, then 10? Because they were still some distance away from Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao, they couldn't personally experience the immense pressure that Zichen exerted on Yi Wentao. Therefore, many people were shocked when they saw Yi Wentao summon his god's domain after his first attack failed. Was Chu Luiyue really so powerful that she could force Family Head to summon his god's domain? The green light spots drifted and soon completely enveloped the space in all directions. An indescribably heavy pressure suddenly descended upon them. Chu Luiyue instantly felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on her body, causing her to expend a lot of effort with every step she took. Even the origin power in her body became sluggish under the influence of this pressure. This god's domain was different from the pressure that Yi Wentao had exerted when he used the Sun Great Axe. In this space, almost everything was under Yi Wentao's control. Big Brother's god's domain is extremely powerful. Not to mention a supreme deity like Xuanhuan, even many supreme deities might not be able to break free from it. This time she shouldn't be able to do anything. Yi Wenzuo was speaking, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by someone. What's that? Yi Wentao frowned and looked at it impatiently. He was stunned by what he saw. Chu Luiyue stood there with her back straight and her eyes gently closed. Then, a silver-red stream of light surged out of her body. In an instant it surged like a river. The dazzling light was like a sharp blade, cleanly slicing through the frozen space. That's her god's domain? Someone murmured in shock. Isn't she a supreme deity? How can this god's domain compete with masters? The silver-red god's domain continued to expand and soon surrounded Chu Luiyue. When the last of the green light around her dissipated, she finally opened her eyes again. At this moment, Yi Wentao also looked up in shock and met Chu Luiyue's eyes. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. There was not the slightest bit of fear or cowardice in that pair of dark, calm and starry eyes. There was only a crazy desire to fight. Yi Wentao had fought with countless cultivators in his life, and there was no lack of geniuses and powerhouses among them. However, he had never seen such a gaze before. It was like a sudden burst of fire under the cold mountains. It had a powerful aura that could devour everything. It was as if everything in front of her was just a passing cloud or floating in the water. It was not worth mentioning at all. Yi Wentao did not know how to describe this feeling. He was clearly the one with a higher realm and should be the one looking down on everything. However, at this moment, facing Chu Luiyue, who seemed to have an indomitable aura, he inexplicably felt a little. He could not describe his feelings at this moment. It was shock, astonishment, and confusion. There was also a trace of nervousness and worry that even he did not want to admit. This gaze was not something that Chu Luiyue should have. Whoosh! The silver-red god's domain surged. Like waves crashing against the reef, rich energy kept surging and making sounds. Soon, the two gods' domains were in a confrontation. In fact, from the outside, Chu Luiyue's god's domain only occupied a small space that surrounded her, Zichen, and Dumpling. Yi Wentao's god's domain still occupied a larger area. It seemed that Yi Wentao had the upper hand. However, in reality, the area around Chu Luiyue was forcefully taken from Yi Wentao by using her own god's domain. Even though Yi Wentao's god's domain was stronger, it was blocked outside and could no longer break through Chu Luiyue's god's domain. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1964. The force in Chu Luiyue's body was being consumed at a crazy rate. Her lips were slightly pale, which showed that it was not easy for her to reach this stage. Yi Wentao was indeed superior to her in terms of strength. This was undeniable. If she wanted to snatch a small piece of land under Yi Wentao's god realm, she would need to expend more energy than Yi Wentao. Fortunately, origin power was something she didn't lack the least. At this moment, Dumpling rushed forward again. This time, her fist was covered with a layer of reddish-gold flames. The scorching heat caused the surrounding air to become scorching hot. Yi Wentao clenched his teeth. Normally, a high god would not be able to withstand the pressure of his god realm. Sometimes, he did not even need to make a move and his opponents would have already fallen under his god realm. However, his opponents this time were really difficult to deal with. Tuanzi and Zichen were existences that possessed the bloodlines of two ancient divine beasts. Moreover, their strengths weren't weak at all. The god realm could not suppress them at all. As for Chu Luiyue, it was even more strange. In the entire divine ruins, there were very few people who could defeat him in the god realm. However, Chu Luiyue did it. Yi Wentao was furious and humiliated. Since the beginning of the fight, the strength that Chu Luiyue had displayed was a public slap to his face. Why was a high god so difficult to deal with? Seeing that Dumpling's fist was about to hit him, Yi Wentao felt the scorching heat. He felt the flames in his chest twitching as if they were about to explode. Finally, he bent his knees slightly and made a sudden move. His entire body was like an arrow that had left the bow as he charged toward Dumpling. He finally understood that if he wanted to get rid of Chu Luiyue, he had to first cripple her two helpers. Due to his fear of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix and the Great Void Phoenix Dragon, Yi Wentao did not intend to kill them. But, at the very least, they had to lose their ability to fight. Only then would he be free to deal with Chu Luiyue. Without any fancy moves, Yi Wentao chose to throw a punch. 8-directional Divine Fist. The power in his body surged towards his fist and collided with Dumpling's fist. Bang! A muffled sound was suddenly heard. One big and one small, one hard and one soft. No matter how he looked at it, the outcome was predestined. However, in the next moment, everyone was shocked to discover that Dumpling wasn't sent flying this time. She was suspended in midair, facing Yi Wentao's fist. A trace of blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth, but she didn't retreat even half a step. Immediately after, the crimson gold flames spread towards Yi Wentao at lightning speed. An intense burning pain came from his hand. Yi Wentao's face was distorted for a moment. But at the same time, he was shocked to discover that Dumpling's bloodline power was purer than he had expected. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to withstand his punch. She wasn't even an adult yet, but her physical strength was almost on par with his. If she was given more time, who knew how strong she would be? Thinking of this, Yi Wentao's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold glint. If he let them go today, they would definitely become a huge disaster in the future. Even if he didn't kill them, he had to get rid of them. He suddenly changed his fist into a palm and grabbed Dumpling's wrist without caring about the burning flame. Dumpling was shocked. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly felt a chill on her wrist. She had a bad feeling and immediately flung Yi Wentao's hand away. She felt a stinging pain. Dumpling immediately looked down and discovered that Yi Wentao had used a sharp object to cut open a wound on her wrist. Fortunately, she had dodged in time and the wound was very shallow. Under the burning of the flame, the bloodstain quickly dried up, leaving behind a dark red bloodstain. Dumpling frowned. She felt that something was wrong. Swoosh! Yi Wentao didn't stop. Instead, he rushed forward at an even faster speed. Dumpling immediately raised her hand to counterattack. But at this moment, she was shocked to discover that she was suddenly unable to gather the power in her body. Yi Wentao was almost within reach. Dumpling's heart suddenly felt like it was being clenched by something. Suddenly, a tall black figure flashed and appeared in front of Dumpling. Was Zichen. He waved his sleeve and several sharp icicles shot out. Yi Wentao was forced to stop. Taking advantage of this moment, Zichen turned around and glanced at Dumpling. Sensing his gaze, Dumpling also raised her head. Zichen was stunned. At this moment, Dumpling's face had a rare look of panic. He had almost never seen such an expression on her face. Zichen's heart skipped a beat. He immediately looked at the wound on her wrist. He quickly went forward and picked up Dumpling. What's wrong with Dumpling? Chu Luiyue also sensed that something was wrong and immediately went forward with a frown. Zichen's movements were extremely fast. He carried Dumpling over to Chu Luiyue's side. Chu Luiyue then saw that Dumpling's face was deathly pale. Actually, from the outside, Dumpling didn't seem to have any problems. But her appearance was clearly abnormal. Dumpling? Chu Luiyue's heart sank. He immediately reached out and touched her wrist. Immediately, his brows furrowed tightly. The energy in Dumpling's body seemed to have completely gone out of control. It began to wander and attack in all directions, unable to gather. However, the force of the attack wasn't very strong. It was like a fog drifting freely. At first glance, there didn't seem to be any problem. However, Chu Luiyue's heart surged with immense anger. This was clearly Yi Wentao deliberately channeling his energy into Dumpling's body and forcefully disrupting the circulation of energy in her body. She suddenly raised her head and glared at Yi Wentao. Yi Wentao, you're despicable. How could you use such a despicable method? Yi Wentao wasn't surprised that Chu Luiyue could see through it. He smiled faintly, but his eyes were extremely cold. I just wanted to let her rest for a while. How is that despicable? Don't forget that we're in a battle. The winner has to be determined. Who can you blame for not protecting your contracted mythological beast well? You. Chu Luiyue was about to step forward when he was suddenly stopped by Dumpling. Are you? Chu Luiyue turned around. Her brows were full of worry. Dumpling, don't worry. This matter isn't over today. Dumpling shook her head. I'm fine. You don't worry. I'll be fine soon. Dumpling had always been lively. Chu Luiyue rarely saw her so weak. For a moment she felt unbearably angry. However, she still gently patted Dumpling's head. Okay. Dumpling, wait for me here. I'll be back soon. After that she glanced at Ziqin. Ziqin, you stay here and protect Dumpling. Ziqin guessed what she wanted to do. He said hesitantly. She was probably no match for Yi Wentao alone. Chu Luiyue had already turned her head and looked at Yi Wentao. Clang. She suddenly smashed the armillary shield in her hand to the ground. Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1965. Yi Wentao's eyes lit up. Is she finally going to use it? However, Chu Luiyue's next move disappointed him greatly. She let go of the armillary sky shield as if she had no intention of using it. Then Chu Luiyue stabbed the red cloud sword into the ground. A crack spread on the ground. Yi Wentao was even more confused. Is Chu Luiyue not going to continue the fight? But judging from her expression, it was clearly not. Whoosh. A red stream of light suddenly flew out. A red scroll floated quietly in front of Chu Luiyue. Nan Hetian's eyes widened almost immediately. Flowing cloud flying diagram. As soon as he finished speaking, the faces of the Nan clan members became extremely ugly. At first they were not sure, but Nan Hetian followed Nan Yifan all the time and was most familiar with this. Since he had said so, it must be the flowing cloud flying diagram. Not only did Xuanhuan capture Luo Yan and the others, but she also took the flowing cloud flying diagram. Someone could not help but exclaim in shock. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually not that surprising. This thing had always been under Nan Yifan's care. This time, when Nan Yuxing and the others came to the Peach Blossom Dock, Nan Yifan secretly handed the flowing cloud flying diagram to them out of worry. But now Nan Yuxing was dead, and the remaining elders were either dead or betrayed the Nan family. It was not surprising that the flowing cloud flying diagram ended up in Chu Luiyue's hands. However, this thing was after all the Nan family's most precious treasure. Now that it was taken away by Chu Luiyue, the Nan family members naturally did not feel good. Nan Hetian took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Don't worry, it belongs to the family head. She can't use it. Whoosh. Chu Luiyue waved her hand gently, and the flowing cloud flying diagram instantly spread out. Nan Hetian choked and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. His eyes were full of shock. The remaining Nan family members did not have any better reactions. Looking at her, could it be that she had really taken the flowing cloud flying diagram for herself? However, Nan Yifan was still breathing. The moment Yi Wentao saw the flowing cloud flying diagram, a rare look of surprise flashed across his face. He and Nan Yifan could be considered old acquaintances, so he was very clear about how much Nan Yifan valued this treasure. If he wasn't worried about Nan Yuxing, he probably wouldn't have taken it out. Who would have thought that in the end Chu Luiyue would benefit? But most importantly, Chu Luiyue seemed to know how to use the power of this thing. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Yi Wentao saw Chu Luiyue reach out his hand. Her fingers were slender and fair like the finest jade. Then she tapped lightly on the flowing cloud flying diagram. Her actions were done casually, with an air of nonchalance and nobility. It was as if he did not care about what was happening in front of him. In the next moment, a stream of light flew out and quickly formed a huge Xian formation in midair. 4 symbols formation. Although Yi Wentao wasn't a Xian master, he was quite knowledgeable about Xian formations, so he immediately recognized this Xian formation the moment he saw it. The scene in front of him caused his pupils to shrink slightly. Just now, Chu Luiyue just lightly touched it, and she managed to form this Xian formation? No. This Xian formation came from the flowing cloud flying diagram. Even a true Grandmaster Shin Master wouldn't be able to successfully activate the four symbols formation in such a short period of time. The only explanation was that this was engraved on the flowing cloud flying diagram. She only needed to inject a little force to activate it. Everyone in the Nan family was also stunned. There's a Xian formation in the flowing cloud flying diagram. For thousands of years, the flowing cloud flying diagram had been placed in the Nan family, and it was inherited and safeguarded by the successive patriarchs. Because the Nan family rarely interacted with other aristocratic families, and Nan Yifan himself was extremely powerful, the number of times he used the flowing cloud flying diagram could be counted on one hand. In many people's minds, the flowing cloud flying diagram was used to save lives, and it was only responsible for quickly bringing people away at a critical moment. This included many members of the Nan family. At this moment, watching Chu Luiyue summon an extremely high-level Xian formation from the flowing cloud flying diagram, the Nan family was stunned. Immediately after, without waiting for them to react, they saw Chu Luiyue's jade-like fingers land a few dots on the flowing cloud flying diagram in succession. One Xian formation after another appeared in succession. Furthermore, the lowest level was actually at the Grandmaster level. These Xian formations quietly suspended in mid-air, and very quickly, they formed a unique Xian formation barrier in front of Chu Luiyue. What was even more terrifying was that the number of Xian formations was still increasing. All kinds of Xian formations surged out one after another, and a powerful aura spread out from above. Yi Wentao's god realm started to faintly tremble. Sensing this, Yi Wentao's heart uncontrollably surged with a trace of uneasiness. One had to know that a Grandmaster Shen Master was able to fight with a venerable god expert. And now, just based on the dozens of Shen formations in front of him, about half of them were at this level. This was almost equivalent to several great Grandmasters fighting against him. He subconsciously turned his head and glanced at Nan Yifan. At this moment, Nan Yifan was in a half-alive, half-dead state, and was completely unaware of all this. Yi Wentao was both shocked and furious. He looked at Chu Luiyue again as if he was looking at a monster. At this moment he finally confirmed one thing. Nan Yifan was not the true owner of the flowing cloud flying diagram at all. Otherwise, it was impossible for Nan Yifan to not react at all when Chu Luiyue caused such a huge commotion. Furthermore, it was possible that even Nan Yifan did not know that the true flowing cloud flying diagram was actually like this. If he had known and told Nan Yuxing, he would not have fallen to his current state. In other words, the flowing cloud flying diagram that the Nan family had treasured and preserved for thousands of years had never truly belonged to them. Instead, it had become Chu Luiyue's object by chance. Chu Luiyue's eyes were burning as she stared intently at Yi Wentao, who was standing in front of her. Then she suddenly activated the power in her body and shouted, "Go!" As her voice fell, the dozens of Xian formations slowly and firmly surrounded Yi Wentao. Violent energy wreaked havoc, and wherever it passed, the green god realm collapsed inch by inch. Digression. I hope that everyone will be reunited and safe during the Lantern Festival. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.